Quick
Ah.
starts.
Is that it?
Starts at a point.
Right.
I'll give it that.
Right. Okay, so do you mind if anyone does come in while you're because they're likely to come in because we do have quite a lot to get through, so if you don't mind with us, we can just start now. So we're going to start with Lewis, who also got a slide up here on sport and religion, so whenever you're ready, Lewis.
Yep. Right, so this is my presentation, which is sport and religion. This is the kind of agenda on how a presentation will go. We'll start off and kind of split it into three sections: spectators, participants, sport entities and institutions, and basically how religion influences all three. Obviously we are in the west of Scotland, so there will be a case study later on about the Old Firm rivalry, which when you kind of first think about sport and religion, I think it's one of the major things you think of, unlike a lot of other kind of rivalries out there in terms of the religious aspect. So in terms of spectators, for a lot of people sport has become the modern day religion. Sport shares a lot of the same effects on spectators as religion. Daniel Land from Murray State University, he said something quite interesting. He said how the similarities between sport fandom and organised religion are striking. Consider the vocabulary associated with both: faith, devotion, worship, ritual, dedication, sacrifice, commitment, spirit, prayer, suffering, festival and celebration. And for example, we can see here, I think that's actually a team in Indonesia. But obviously only God can stop us there, quite religious. Celtic there, in the last season it was a display, said the one true faith, so Celtic was the one kind of religion for them. And as you can see there, the wee top the guys wearing, football's my religion. I actually think you can buy that online, so you don't for any last minute Christmas presents. He also Daniel Arnold, he also states that spectators worship other human beings, their achievement and groups to which they belong, and then he compares sports stadiums with modern day, basically says they are modern day cathedrals and churches, and it follows gather there to worship their heroes and pray for their successes. For me, the latter point is actually quite interesting. Kind of brought up the question as to whether the rise in interest in sports, just in a kind of modern sense, there's a relationship there between the kind of decrease in church attendance. You hear it quite a lot in terms of, well, if the Celtic fans were, if they were actually at church every week, there would be 60,000 there as opposed to 60,000 at Parkhead kind of thing. So I've done a wee bit of research myself. These are the 4 top countries in Europe where there are non-believers and non-religious countries. Obviously Sweden is the top there, 64%. The wee graph there I've got is actually attendance figures for their respective football leagues. As you can see, from the majority of them, Sweden's maybe a bit of an exception, but Denmark, Germany and France have all went up in recent years by quite significantly. Sweden as well, the highest attendance have been in the 2000s, so you can maybe even argue that, even though it's kind of up and down as well. But that's just something I kind of thought was quite interesting, because it has brought up a lot in terms of kind of decreasing numbers who go to church. So obviously it isn't just spectators, it's also people who are involved in sport that are quite religious, and a lot of them will showcase religious beliefs on the field of play. They'll usually make a sign of a cross, so they'll make some other religious gesture. That there is Tim Tebow on the left, and he is probably the most kind of famous religious American kind of figure. He's was an American footballer, he's now playing baseball funnily enough, but there was a kind of craze a few years back, it was called Tebow, and that's essentially it, it's just praying on the ground. Guy there as well, Mike Tyson, who I'm sure you'll know who he is, he's actually a Muslim, quite an interesting picture there of him. Also the one in the middle is Kaka, and that's an unveiling. He's quite famous, iconic I Belong to Jesus shirt underneath his football top. The guy there on the kind of right is John Jones. You see from his tattoos, I don't know if you can see that well, but I think it says Philippines, and there's a wee kind of Bible reference as well, so he's actually an MMA fighter. He's more famous now for all the drug use, unfortunately, but and the guy far left is Ryan Hall, who is a long distance runner. But for me, the one person I want to kind of focus on is actually Marvin Andrews. If you don't know, he's a former Rangers defender. Andrews, he's a devout Christian, quite well known from Scottish football circles for his religious beliefs. In 2004-05 season, he suffered damaged ligament against in a match against Dundee. Initially, a lot of folk, physios, doctors and whatnot, they thought he would be out of action for at least 4 months. But Andrews was having none of it. He refused medical treatment, and this is the quote he had. He said, "I respect the medical people at Rangers, but I don't want to have the operation. I know it's hard for people to understand, but God has given me strength. He's in control of my life, and I believe I will be fine." Now, to be fair to Marvin Andrews, his leg did hold up at the end of the season, and they actually ended up winning the league. I think the manager, Alex McLeish, actually said they defied logic. Something about this though was that Rangers actually got him to sign a wee clause. If he did get injured, they would not be responsible. But if his career is wrecked because he's going through this injury, they're not responsible. But there is an example of not only showcasing Rogers beliefs, but actually thinking it has an effect on the field of play, really. However, that does, when you're very kind of vocal about your Rogers beliefs, that sometimes can backfire a wee bit. 2006, Marvin Andrews, his church claimed that his church could cure lesbian Liberal Democrat MSP Margaret Smith. He also said that gays were an abomination, said there's a demon in their spirits are ill, but God can help them through his church, and anyone who doubts this can check the Bible. So pretty scandalous comments there from Marvin Andrews, but I did lead dark calls for the SFA discipline him. Rangers, I think they never released a statement or anything. There was no comment from them, and no actions are taken from the SFA. But I suppose that would happen nowadays, certainly the rise of social media. I don't know if that would maybe be a bit different. Of course, it's not just spectators and participants who showcase religious beliefs. Sometimes there are sporting entities and institutions who will involve themselves as well. The one thing I want to look at here is the death of Pope John Paul II, which is actually a kind of tradition in Italy. When the Pope dies, the weekend after, the supporters basically all of it's called off, and that's due to the Italian National Olympic Committee. They manage all sport and they basically just say to all the associations that it's better not to carry ahead with sport events. One sport event that did take place was Formula 1. The Formula 1's actually based in Malaysia, so I suppose they wouldn't come under that, but there's still a lot of Italian drivers, Italian teams, most notably Ferrari. They painted the noses of their two cars black as a mark of respect, and it was the Bahrain Grand Prix. However, the Italian TV stations, they didn't actually show the race weekend. They were all kind of focused on the Pope and the kind of aftermath of that. Something I found interesting about that race as well, Italian driver Jarno Trulli, he finished second, and he actually raced with a sticker on his helmet that said "Thank you Pope," and as you can see from the wee gif there as well, if he's not thinking about the race or finishing second, he's just thinking about the Pope, so another key religious aspect there. Now if you can compare and contrast that with this.
A period of silence here in Hampton Park in memory of the late Pope John Paul II. As a mark of respect for the classic Pope John Paul II, we ask you to observe a minute's silence.
football's reaction to the Pope dying, which is obviously contrasts quite a bit to Italy and the sports there. That was actually cut short, that minutes line, which is quite interesting. It's the first time I've ever seen that. So yeah, obviously with that we kind of sideway step there, I'm going to obviously talk about the Old Firm now and kind of go on a wee case study about it. Old Firm rivalry is unlike any of football. Gone to Academic Balmoral, not that one, but the one in Ghostbusters. The games are no mere local derby, but a clash of cultures, two world views with Rangers champion the cosmopolitanism and simply that of Catholicism. So he obviously thinks it's bigger than just a normal rivalry. Obviously, religious hatred is not uncommon at Old Firm games, but I think it's important to stress that Ulster politics also plays a huge part as well. Clashes between the two sides, they often produce a pretty feisty heated atmosphere, as you know if any of us before. Rivalry is often characterised by songs, and these songs will usually convey a certain set of identities and ideologies. Rangers fans are known to sing songs that are predominantly anti-Catholic and anti-Irish. Songs such as the Billy Boys, there's a line in the song that references up their knees in Fenian blood, and No Pope of Rome, which references the events of 1619. There's a few examples they can often be heard in the slopes of Ibrox Park. Celtic fans, on the other hand, they prefer to sing more about songs reflecting their own and relating to their club's origins in Ireland. Songs such as Field of Athenry actually references rebellion against the famine and the crown. That's actually played at over the PA of Celtic Park. It's quite interesting. Obviously, Irish Republican songs are very popular amongst the Celtic support. A lot of people are quite critical of these songs because they glorify IRA. Now obviously the religious hatred, it's not just a 90-minute thing. You also need the term 90-minute figure. It isn't always confined to just the Old Firm games themselves. Between the 1920s and 1989, Rangers employed a sectarian signing policy. Basically, people wouldn't sign any Catholics. And in 1989, Mo Johnson became the first Catholic since the First World War to sign for Rangers. Maurice Johnson is interesting for a number of reasons. Firstly, not only was he a Catholic, but he was also a former Celtic player. He was quite a prominent former Celtic player, and he was basically, he was actually meant to sign for Celtic, but it was Rangers who just snatched him under the noses of Celtic. Obviously the reaction to his signing was pretty mixed. Celtic fans were appalled. They quickly nicknamed Mo Johnson Judas, which is also fun enough a biblical reference. And well, some Rangers fans were quite happy. They felt they got one over Celtic. On the other hand though, a lot of supporters were quite displeased with his arrival, as I'll show you here.
Lanarkshire town of Larkhall is perhaps the most staunch Rangers stronghold in central Scotland. Red, white and blue predominate, as do Protestants. Roman Catholics are outnumbered by an estimated 18 to 1. News of Maurice Johnston's arrival at Ibrox was met with predictable shock and some horror around the town's pubs.
I never thought of seeing a Catholic, especially the one that did sign it. Just unbelievable. I can't go let me wake up in the morning and move it through.
You take it that seriously?
Right.
It's a good player, but the Catholic, this down here is Rangers support here.
Do you think Rangers supporters will stop going because Maurice Johnson signed he's a Catholic?
Some might. No, I think Rangers will lose some support through this.
Rangers, they're not as transparent ready, and that's what it's for. It's for blue noses, it's not for Catholics. I don't agree with signing a Catholic up. I'm not on the case of by the way, but you've got a blue team and they're going to look better.
He's a Catholic, and this is a Protestant.
Do you think it's a good thing that he's signed for Rangers?
good thing for himself, good finances, but for Rangers, I don't think.
I don't know about the weather sign, Catholic. But if you're going to say, if you're supposed to sign one, you're signing with the best, isn't it? He is the best. So you agree with the decision to sign Boris Johnson even though he's a Catholic? I wouldn't say I would agree, no. You're going to be signing this European thing is, you're agreeing with the best.
I'll be very surprised that the people of Larkhall will entertain it.
The acid test for the fans from Larkhall will come when Boris Johnson finally steps onto the field in a Rangers jersey. Only time will tell if their attitude can be changed.
Right, so that's actually my hometown, which is quite funny. But yeah, a lot of really interesting viewpoints there. I think the rivalry has changed quite a lot from then. So, in recent times, there's been quite an intense public debate regarding sectarianism and its place in 21st century Scotland. Quite recently, the SNP forced through the Offensive Behaviour Football Act. The Act targets football fans that sing offensive songs or display offensive messages or slogans. And it has been widely criticised by pretty much everyone from fans in the stand, senior judges of court. You can see the Green Brigade there with the banner. Just kind of expressing their display about the whole bill. Last year, I actually got to speak to Sir John Devine on the issue. He said a lot of really interesting things. I mean, obviously the bill's principles try to eradicate sectarianism is a good idea, but I think the way they went about it is probably not great, and I think Devine actually agrees with all of that stuff. He actually said it was a case of taking the proverbial hammer to crack the nut. There was already legislation in place. The issue was that the prosecuting authorities and the police were not operating it satisfactorily. The legislation he talks about, Labour introduced a number of bills under Jack McConnell regarding self-sectarianism and religious prejudice in the kind of early 2000s. This was an add-on to that. It has, to be quite frankly, been kind of widely ridiculed by a lot of people. But then he actually said something really interesting to me. He said that he felt that a big reason why the SNP are so kind of set on this issue in the bill itself is basically because they are interested in how they're perceived abroad. Obviously not so much the rest of the UK, but abroad, if you're looking at Scotland, who's trying to project themselves as this 21st century modern society, and then they have this football rivalry which is based on events that happened hundreds of years ago, and it's not a good image to have. Yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you for listening. If you get any questions, go ahead and ask them.
He asked you, if you have any questions, then go ahead and ask them. Go.
No, when you showed the clip of John Paul II, the kind of the lack of respect or whatever for the... Do you actually think that was an anti-Catholic thing? Or would there not have been a similar reception, say, if the Queen had died or a member of the royal family, and there was a minute's silence, that probably be booed out, no anything to do with the religious aspect of it. So basically what I'm asking is, do you think that it actually was anti-Catholic or not just a kind of...
I think that
kind of thing.
It's a good question you bring up. I think certainly there is an aspect of a kind of anti-Celtic and get off Celtic there. This is somebody that kind of worship. Same thing if it was Rangers. I've no doubt in my mind that Celtic fans would probably boo him in the silence of the Queen. But I think deep down, when you kind of dig beneath the surface, there maybe is a kind of anti-Catholic or anti-Irish kind of thing there. But maybe quite hard to do.
See, what's your own opinions on the Green Brigade?
I think they're actually pretty good. In terms of the religious aspect, there's a certain song that Celtic fans would sing quite a lot. It's called Roman and the Roman, and it's pretty sectarian as you get. Green Brigade pretty much don't sing that song, and it doesn't really get sung that much because they obviously have quite a big influence within the support. Now, obviously they have a lot of suppose, quite offensive kind of political songs that you could argue. But in terms of the religious aspect, I think they've actually done a good job to kind of eradicate that. Yeah.
Do you think sectarianism's kind of dying out in kind of wider Scottish society?
I don't think it's as big an issue as people maybe make. I think like stuff like domestic abuse is a lot, it's a much larger issue. But I think because the media in Scotland is so focused on football and so focused on these two teams that it gets probably more publicity than maybe deserves at times.
Do you think, Lewis, that sport is a place that can be useful to promote tolerance and diversity? So obviously the case about the Old Firm perhaps indicates that it might even make it worse because of some of the kind of situations. But in general, is there a case to be made that actually sport, because of its power, could be influential at actually encouraging people to think about tolerance and diversity?
I think definitely. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I definitely would say that. I think for whatever reason, Glasgow and the Old Firm's just the exception. You look at any other football rivalries out there, a lot of them will have the political edge, maybe they'll have the kind of, this side of the city or that side of the city, but there's not that many that have the kind of religious aspect of it, so it is, I think it's maybe an exception rather than the rule.
And I guess one of the things that strikes me is that sport, historically, especially sport invented in England, if you like, there was this kind of tradition called kind of muscular Christian traditions that were at the heart of sport. A lot of sport was actually started by church groups, by faith groups and others, and that was about kind of developing character in young people, giving them the right direction, all that kind of morality, if you like. So do you still see any of that within sport, or is sport being kind of completely secularized and therefore it's unacceptable? People don't want to see any kind of religion or any kind of doctrine being involved.
I think even in terms of football, the aspect of the Saturday kick-off, 3 o'clock, the whole reason why that happened was because obviously a lot of the working class that worked in factories and whatnot, and the industries, and they would get Saturday off. And the reason for that was just because it was good to kind of take your mind off it, and it was proven that you would be kind of more focused when you go back to work. So I suppose in terms of the fact that there's still a Saturday kick-offs, maybe that some of that has survived, but I'm not too sure. It's a difficult one to answer. I think sport definitely has become more of a business, there's no doubt in our mind. I think once the amateur roots of the sport kind of turns into professionalism, I think you do lose all of that, and that's natural. I think that happened to football even in the 1800s when they went professional.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, sorry, no, I've got one more.
Just last question, you kind of almost answered it when you touched on it with your last answer to me in regards to the kind of anti-Irish kind of stance of certain clubs in Scotland. You say that Rangers are more likely to buy anti-Irish than anti-Catholic, because I mean they've signed many players like for Italy, Spain, there's no big deal about Caixinha, but whereas if it's somebody like Catholic school in Scotland or came from Ireland, there's probably be more kind of uproar about it.
Definitely, I think the Catholic thing is still there, but I think it's maybe a wee bit overplayed. I think it's definitely an anti-Irish thing, 100%. But I think when you see Rangers saying a guy like McLean, so I just like Robbie Keane or just all your kind of big Irish players. I could never really imagine that. Vision of that. I can't imagine the Catholic manager. I mean, the second Caixinha was Catholic, so yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Ross, you're up next. Just on the desktop there, just look at this.
Danke. Okay. Very good.
Piece of
ourselves. No, but you're actually documentary. Fish. How we put that in Scotland documentary?
That's whatever you're.
Yep.
Ready?
Okay, so this is my talk on sport and community development. First things first, if you could all put your phones and laptops away, because there's going to be a wee question that does require a bit of thought and you can cheat with internet access, so we'll make sure there's none of that. So a wee bit of background on the content. First of all, I'll look at the kind of background surrounding community and sport. There'll be a wee bit of opinion and theory. I'll then look at the role of a sports development officer within the community. There'll be quite a large part on mega events. It's also quite an appropriate topic, and I'll then come on to the Icelandic model and the case study of the Balcano. Callum Fisher, off your phone please. Who's in charge? Basically we have the local government. Their money comes from Westminster via Holyrood and other things such as council tax. The local government, they're the ones that are basically in charge of the local community aspects. So we have powers that they have. Mandatory are ones that they must provide, so that's things like education, so primary schools, high schools. We've then got permissive, things that they usually provide, every decent community has, you know, like the likes of a leisure centre, things like that. And then discretionary, that's really where the community aspect comes in, so that's things that they can provide. They don't need to, but things like youth clubs, things to really encourage the community to get involved in different aspects of sport and life. There are 32 councils in Scotland with elections every 5 years, so this is a question that you'll get the answer to at the end, so we'll divide the class up half and half. You get this half here and this half here. There is a prize for whoever can get the answer. It's a pretty dull question, but there is a prize for the winners, so whoever can tell me how many seats were up for grabs from the 32 councils in Scotland in last year's election between your two sides. We'll come back to it at the end, but you can have a think during the presentation. As I say, there's a prize for the winner. So, on to the biggest story of 2017. Now, some of you might think it's the world nearly ending with Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, nuclear war, but it wasn't. It was in fact the Tories going from 115 seats in 2012 to 276 seats in 2017 in the local council elections. Interestingly enough, Glasgow had the lowest turnout for this election, and 7 out of the 10 poorest constituencies in Scotland are within the Glasgow area. So I think with an election, you know, so connected to community, and I think that's quite interesting. Also, East Renfrewshire had the highest turnout, Lower Whiteface and South Giffnock, they're actually the two richest areas in Scotland, so I thought that was quite an interesting thing to point out. A wee bit of theory. Coulter looked at the social benefits of sport. Now this is a study for Sport Scotland, and he basically found that communities were sort of sceptical of policy. They viewed it, that they get so much of it, that they viewed it as a sort of short-term fix by the government just to kind of cover their tracks. I think it's kind of harsh, because it puts the government in a sort of no-win situation, you know, where they're trying to help, but at some points they get criticised, so it's very difficult. The other difficulty is it's hard to prove the impact of sport. You know, youth crime, for example, could be down to other factors such as increased policing, you know, things like that. The role of schools. It wouldn't just be down to sport; it's more of a collective thing. Morgan and Summers, they actually point out that people can view sport as negative in the community because they feel that governments view it as a bigger priority than education and health. I tend to disagree with this, and I'll point out it's an example from a while ago, but I feel like it's still relevant. In 2002, the Glasgow GP exercise referral scheme was introduced and is still used to this day. It was coordinated by health and fitness development workers, and of the 5,173 surveyed, 60% said there was a general improvement to health, and there was also a reduction in depression and anxiety. So I think that shows that there are obviously benefits to sport, and that sport can also benefit other factors such as education and health. You know, it's not just sport for sport's sake, it has a broader impact. So yeah, we quote from Sport Scotland here: participating in sport can improve the quality of life of individuals and communities, promote social inclusion, improve health, counter antisocial behaviour, raise individual self-esteem and confidence, and widen horizons. So that's again just kind of showing the benefits that sport can provide to a community and to people in general. Long and Sanderson, they basically feel that point out that sport benefits the community, it can enhance confidence, reduce crime and encourage local pride. Obviously we touched on the crime factor earlier, but as a broad sense it's largely viewed as positive for themselves. They also point out interestingly it brings together two political ideologies. So we've got left wing with the kind of social class structure and getting all classes involved in sport, and then we've got the right wing of regulation and strict policy regarding it. So, I actually get in touch with a sports development officer because I felt that since I was doing sport and community development, that was probably quite an appropriate person to talk to. So Laura Young from Western Bartonshire Council, she helps to run programmes to get basically all ages involved in sport, and she also helps with a youth group. So this youth group is something that I was actually a part of, and it was for people who are teenagers at school, and it's to get them into coaching, so coaching at like summer camps, for like primary schools, things like that. So just as a wee avenue for a bit of income and to help with sport in the community. So she said there are positives. I've seen children come in at preschool and now they're getting involved with the youth group. This really shows that you're doing something for the community. They can be involved from 18 months old and still have the interest in sport through to their teenage years. So it's great to see sport impact their life positively. With every positive though, there can be negatives. There can be a problem with participation levels after the age of 12 years old. Perhaps early teenage years, especially for females, there's sort of stigma about being involved in sport and a perception that isn't cool. But it's my job to encourage them back into sport. So I think everyone's kind of aware, you know, PE for example, you would sometimes get people who maybe, you know, they'd forget their kit quite often, they maybe weren't interested in taking part. So again, there's these programmes built to sort of help counter that. She also touched on the impact of Glasgow 2014. I'll come on to mega events in a little bit more detail, but I thought it was quite interesting. She said at the time it was a real positive, there was a huge amount of funding available and we were able to try a lot of projects in the local area, so I think everyone's aware there was massive scope for different things to be tried out in areas with community and sport. And she said that now, after the game, a few years later, there's more of an outlook on targeting the most deprived areas and including in sport. Social inclusion has been a real focus in recent years following the games, and with specific programmes looking at how it can change lives for the better. But again, there's a wee difficulty with that. Perhaps it's slightly difficult in Western Bartonshire to get funding, as we don't have a large ethnic community, and the government seems to be really focusing on initiatives to help refugees get involved in sport. But we're working as an organisation to try and solve that. So again, that shows you some of the difficulties as well as some of the positives. And brings us on to mega events, basically as a whole and their impact on community. So Grenou, we'll go with Grenou, pointed out as legal and technical arrangements become more complex, democratic accountability becomes lost since it becomes more difficult to identify the location of power and decision making. So that really relates to mega events as a whole, and I think it shows that, you know, some people don't really know who's in charge, who's running the whole thing. It can lead to anger from local citizens. People can often be removed from their homes without any say. I think people have touched on before who've been doing their talks on the Jack and Ellie, the family from Glasgow 2014 who were pretty much forced out of their homes. This was also an issue at London 2012 where there was an accommodation scandal where people were moved out of their homes, promised other housing, and it simply didn't arise. As a result, we've now seen fewer governments bidding for mega events. You know, we've now seen the likes of Qatar and Russia win the likes of World Cups. I think this is maybe partly down to the fact that less countries are now bidding for these events, there's less competition, and I think it really is a broad issue and something that we're seeing more and more. But there are positives of mega events, so they provide world-class facilities, and if these can be used in the correct way, then they are a massive benefit. There's an increase, you know, even if we look at London for example, we've got the Olympic Stadium, it's now getting used by West Ham for example. Increase in feel-good factors, that actually relates back to Long and Sanderson's benefits of sport that I mentioned earlier. So I think that's something that we're all probably aware of. During Glasgow 2014 there was a bit of a buzz about Glasgow certainly, and as Scotland as a whole, when you saw, you know, the opening ceremonies really portraying Glasgow and Scotland in a positive light. There's also tourism and commercial impact, so at the time there is a wee boost to the economy, but this can lead to a price inflation, as Mike pointed out, which isn't necessarily positive. But just a wee personal example, in Euro 2008, held in Austria and Switzerland, I went to Germany against Poland at the tournament, and that was at Klagenfurt in Austria, and really enjoyed it, really liked the place, and we actually went back 2 years later and went to different places in Austria. So that's just a wee personal example of how it can draw in tourists and people can come back in the future. On to another thing, Beijing in 2008, Mang Jiang and Jin Ji pointed out that this has the ability to be positive for women. So an example I'll give you is the roller derby in China. Now it really came about in the mid-2000s, and does anyone know what roller derby is?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's going in a wee circle with the rollerblades and stuff.
Yeah, so it's rollerblades, but they can let barbs land out of the way. It's really physical, and it's quite a complex point scoring system to it, but it's quite interesting. It's not really seen as a feminine sport. It's quite, and the rules are quite. I'm not saying manly, but they're not exactly feminine, shall we say. But it was based originally in the US, and the interesting thing about it is it rejects traditional sports development methods, so it's not actually run by government. It's purely this US-based Women's Flat Track Derby Association, and they've been deemed as revolutionary because they don't take any real interest from the government towards it. And people have actually pointed out that it helps empower women since it's arrived in China. And that all comes from in 2008 with the Games. Pavlidis has actually pointed out that the Olympic spirit of the Games helped embrace this sport for Chinese people, and really led to it becoming accepted in their society. There's now local leagues in Shanghai, Beijing and Hong Kong, so that's again looking at the community impact of bringing this sport in and then working down the local level. So as you can see from the picture, it's not exactly your usual sport. So yeah, it's quite interesting thing to look at. So the impact of the Commonwealth Games, Glasgow 2014, we were all aware of it. We had the community sport hubs getting brought in. This was basically brought into the government for the Games. It was lottery funded with 50% of them based in schools. It brings together basically sports club and organisations and provides them with a hub where they can all be based. There are 5 principles: growth and participation, engaging the local community, promoting community leadership, offering a range of sporting opportunities, bringing all appropriate key partners, groups and people together. So that really sets it out nice and simply. They had a 2-year target of 150 across Scotland, from the Games in August 2014. By March 2016 they'd topped that with 153, so there's now aiming to be 200 open by 2020 across Scotland, so you can see it's really growing. We commented with Chris, it's fantastic to see they've actually committed to this, relating to the government. It's about participation, enjoyment and health. If we create an Olympic champion off the back of this, then all the better. So again, that shows you the real positives coming out of the Commonwealth Games. On to Iceland now, and it's a really interesting case study because BBC looked into this earlier on this year. In 1998, 42% of 15 to 16 year olds said they'd been drunk in Iceland. 20 years ago, Reykjavik was the worst in Europe, that's the country's capital, for youth drinking, smoking and use of drugs. We can now see that this has changed. In 2017, the number of 15 to 16 year olds who said they've been drunk was down to 5%, and Reykjavik is now rated as the best in Europe in terms of youth drinking, smoking and use of drugs. So how did they manage to do this? Just a wee let's go Iceland there for positive propaganda. Iceland, so what's changed? Runsdale points out this, the Icelandic model of adolescent substance use, nice catchy name for that, focuses on reducing known factors of substance abuse while strengthening a broad range of parental, school and community protective factors. Now, there was basically an introduction of a 5-point plan as a result of the 80s and 90s when they had all these issues. There was an introduction of a curfew of 10 PM for under 16s, so basically they all had to be home by 10 PM. If you were out in the street, you were basically brought back to your parents. There was a parent pledge that parents signed a form to say they wouldn't promote drinking in the house, they wouldn't let children try alcohol under the age of 18. There's a yearly school survey for every pupil, so that was basically targeting specific schools where there was certain issues and helping that, going about sorting that. The government also provided $100 million a year, £75 million. basically for youth initiatives in the community. So again, that shows you positive community development, and to keep kids occupied. There was a £374 equivalent voucher for kids to get involved in sport that the government provided every year. So again, that shows you that they were really trying with that. Now at the same time, in the UK as a whole, between 2012 and 2014, spending in youth services has been down by 36%, and that's been as much as 2 million for certain council areas. So a huge, contrast between the two. Now going to come on to Real Vallecano. They are a Spanish second division side. Does anyone know where they're from in Spain?
Madrid.
Well, technically yes. I knew you used to say that. Vallecas. Vallecas. There you go. Well done. It's basically a region in a suburb of Madrid with 65,000 people, and they're really a massive link between club and community. Left-wing club, kind of similar values to the likes of St Pauli, even Celtic as well, of inclusion. David Nelson, a journalist, says, "I'm not looking for a young lad who grows up near the Bernabeu to be a Rayo fan. They're very much focused on where they come from and who they are." So, yep, the fans take new signs around the area. I think just that itself is slightly bizarre in this modern world of mega money. And it's interesting to see that. Ultras also perform a number of protests. We're wondering why they're up there. That is because that says 10:30 AM and it's 10:30 PM kickoff, and they basically had signs up saying keep the noise down, it's sleep time, not football time. So that was basically a protest by them. But I've also got a wee example here of how they are linked to. Basically looking at the sport.
If he turns into Rayo because he likes what they stand for, Rayo would be delighted by that. But I think Rayo are very much focused on where they come from and who they are.
De verdad que es muy orgulloso a la gente de Ciudad Rayo, pues el hecho de que Rayo de una vez por todas limpie y se instale en la corazón y el alma del barrio de la comunidad.
I think there's a belief that football isn't just about the game itself. That career was very strong supporting, sometimes by the fans, sometimes by the players, sometimes by the famous players.
Una persona de aquí de Vallecas me contó el caso de Carmen, yo como capitán, hago una reunión con la plantilla y Carmen está en una situación complicada, necesita nuestra ayuda y vamos a ayudar a la señora, que es una señora muy mayor que se quedaba en casa y bueno, intentamos ayudarle con lo que pudimos, recaudando pues, dinero para que ella tuviera otra casa, para que tuviera un alquiler, para comer. La historia de Carmen estuvo muy bien, pero hay otras historias que no sé.
So that was just to give you a wee background. So that was the example of Carman there, who basically I'm no one need to see the answer here. We're done. So basically, what we had. Oh, right, that's just fun.
For us, it's the visitor economy and all the businesses and jobs.
I'll just turn that down. And we'll go back to the slideshow. This is what happens when I'm a bit of a technical. So, on to the summary. Positives and negatives. There are positives and negatives of sport, obviously. But as we see, sport community as a whole, I would say it's a positive. Sport can help with other community issues. So as we say, it's not just sport for sport's sake. Sport can help with education, with health, as I've touched on. Roller derby and sport hubs are examples of how mega events have been benefits for communities and sport, and really help, because there are obviously negatives of mega events, which we've covered in this class, but overall I'd say they can provide positives. Iceland are setting an example clearly, as we've seen with sport and community, and really brought down the issues that we've had. That would be something for the government here to look at. And as I've touched on, community spirit with Rayo Vallecano there, of the players helping out the old lady who was evicted from her house, something which now seems a bit mental in the modern day of mega wages and that sort of thing. So yes, thank you for listening. As we said, the total number of council seats in Scotland, we hear predictions this side. How many are going for?
don't know.
Is there no, what's it, how many did you say regions there were, was it?
That's the snappy answer.
And there's about at least 10, 15 per.
Give us an answer.
345.
No, there's more than that, it's
Okay,
500.
345. And then you say, guys?
There's more than that, man.
650.
Okay, he's one, but he's miles off. There's 1,227 seats in Scotland, so there we go. So you will get your prize in a minute, but thank you all for listening. That's how we ask my references. Any questions?
Questions?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to ask with Iceland, like it's good that the numbers have came down, but do you think that's the right way to go about things? Because it's quite intrusive, like the kind of methods are not saying that's the right way.
I know what you're saying. Interestingly enough, I think a lot of people took it on board. I think because Iceland's such a small country and they are quite tight-knit communities, but from what I've read, they really brought themselves together. Families helped out with one another, so I think they really did take it on board, and we've seen the results. You know, the mayor of Reykjavik actually pointed out that he believes this is why Iceland beat England at Euro 2016, because they had that generation from those players that have came through. They were all involved in this model, in that scheme, and they've been a direct result of that. So I think most people were on board with it. Yeah. Carl?
See, like in regards to Scotland in particular, about kind of youth drinking and that, what it says, see like the kind of summer holidays, kind of age group between say 12 and 16 is maybe kind of isolated, because like there's hundreds of good schemes on at night time, etc. But see, like if you want to go for a kick with your pals, there's like the pitches are all locked during the day and that. I know that kind of Kemp, you know, that kind of slags that kind of mentality about that, but like the pitches actually are locked and you can't go on and play football. Some even the parks, the goalposts are taken down. Do you know what you need to do more with stuff like that? Because there's a lot of good schemes, as I say, kind of night time, and when the pitches are open you can get on, but they're locked during the day. And
I think that's just a simple thing. You know, I think people, you know, schools and councils are so concerned about keeping their pitches in good nick for teams coming to train on and we're paying their lets, but I think there needs to be more partnerships with schools and councils just to let, you know, even if it's just kids from that school to come on and play on the pitches, you know, even get a couple of volunteers to just supervise it, things like that. So I think there certainly should be, you know, things like that. I think they've got to encourage sport, especially after the Commonwealth Games. You know, we've seen that. I think more people can get involved in sport now, the better. Mark?
Well, do you think there's any obvious that would stop us from adopting that plan in Scotland? And I'm thinking of the curfew.
Yeah.
Because we're already, we seem to be in a paramount police state here, so...
Yeah, well, I think it would be interesting to see if we actually could, but I think the issue is we're constantly seeing cuts now. You know, there's more and more cuts coming from the top down, and I think that's obviously having an impact, and it would be difficult to implement. Britain is obviously a much bigger country as a whole. Scotland in particular is perhaps a more similar size to Iceland, and it would be interesting to see if they did try that. Parent pledge, I don't know what you think, but I don't know if parents could really pledge. I think Iceland is a richer country as a whole to Scotland. I don't know if parents in the East End of Glasgow could pledge to their kids not going out and drinking alcohol. I think that's maybe a difficulty. But there are factors in there, you know, for example, the school survey targeting the poorest schools to try and make them better. I think that would be a pretty simple thing to apply. It'd be interesting to see if they could actually do that, but again, it's up to government.
When you spoke to the community development officer, she talked about the fact that the reason why they don't get funding from government, or they get a lot of funding for sport, is because there's not a lot of refugees.
Yep.
I just found that quite a bizarre quote. Did you question why she thought?
I didn't, but obviously she's involved in it at that level, and I think they do get funding for a lot of projects, but specifically the government have been trying to really go in on the people coming into the country and try to get them involved in society and community as a whole. So I think when she was saying that, she was meaning broadly, you know, certain areas where there are more refugees, there are more people, you know, coming from other countries coming in, to get them involved. So, you know, I think it's maybe been taken out of context slightly just with the quote, but what she's saying is that it is, Western Barnshire a slight difficulty with that because it's difficult for them to get funding for.
I mean, I think it's really interesting. I think I'm going to go back to the Iceland point, but also about the kind of clubs that you showed in Canada. So the difference in Iceland and in other Scandinavian nations as well is that they are kind of much more social welfareists. They pay more taxes, and therefore that the use of that tax is to kind of support a kind of system, if you like, of sport and other kind of active participation because they believe in the long term that's going to lead to a better quality of life. Is it likely that that's the issue, is that actually people are unwilling to pay additional taxes to be able to have the facilities and provision, the support networks that would allow the kind of system you've got in Iceland to be implemented? And secondly, related to that is that the clubs, for example, to the Real Valley Academy, a club based in its community with commitments to its community, which might actually receive public funding if you're able to demonstrate that a lot of our clubs in the UK context have moved away from the whole notion of themselves being assets for the community. Clubs used to be in community, and now are many are outside of the physical community and actually aren't really that bothered by the community.
I think there's, first point to make, I think just on a general scale, I think if more people were aware of the fact that there is this Icelandic model, I don't think, I certainly wasn't aware of it, I don't know if any of you were, but I certainly wasn't aware of that coming in. 10 PM curfew seems a bit strange, but it obviously has an impact. So I think if people were more aware of it, maybe they would be more open to it. I think that's the only way you could really judge. But as I say, there would be difficulties in perhaps paying more tax in a time where taxpayers are paying more and the government are making more cuts. It would be too much to ask. I think we've got enough going on just now in the country without that. The point about clubs and community, I think there are still community programmes run. St Mum, for example, still do youth programmes on a Friday night within their community to try and engage people and young people in sport. But certainly in a time where wages, as I've touched on, clubs as a whole are moving away from community and more focusing on their global brand with globalisation coming into play. I think that's really apparent and something that we can't really get away from.
Good. Okay. Thanks a lot, Ross.
Cheers.
Jack. Yeah, whenever you're ready, Jack.
Hi, so my name's Jack, and today I'm going to be talking about sports and ethnicity. So what is ethnicity? Ethnicity is the fact or state of belonging to a social group that has a common national or cultural tradition. Sport and ethnicity relationship. So sport and ethnicity make sport a beautiful game because it links to one another. That could be positive or negative aspects of sport world. For example, different ethnicity groups can bring out new exciting cultures, and I think that's expressed through the likes of mega events and other big tournaments. You've also got like different kind of sporting talents, so like different ethnic groups have specific like talents in their own sport. Probably the negatives is the most obvious, which is race, so like racism and obviously different religion beliefs. So I think sport and ethnicity as well, it kind of links to a lot of the presentations that we spoke about. So you've got communities, mega events, religion. So what I'll be looking at in the presentation, so the history of ethnicity in sport, how certain ethnic groups are branded in sport or labelled using a better term, racism in sport, in particular football. And in my conclusion, I'll be drawing up the positives and negative element to sport and ethnicity, and has sport developed and accepted different ethnic groups. So a bit of history on ethnicity. So ethnic diversity has been a feature in society for a long period, right back to the times of the World War. Immigration up to the mid-20th century, however, was limited to small numbers of blacks, Chinese and Asians in ports like London, Cardiff, Bristol and Liverpool, which have been one of the centres of the slave trade in the 18th and 19th century. In athletics, a number of sprinters from the British Caribbean made a name for themselves in the period from the end of the 19th century to the late 1950s. Wharton, London, Bailey, Wint. There were cricketers too, like Larry Constant for Trinidad, who played in Lancashire between the wars. In their sports, however, there were all expectations perceived as exotic curiosities and thus not seen as a threat to the larger community. The impact of post-war immigration. So after the Second World War, black and Asian servicemen who stayed in Britain were joined by waves of immigrants. From June 1948, 492 Jamaicans arrived in Tilbury docks on the Empire Windrush. By 1958, 125,000 West Indians and 55,000 Asians. All immigrants were welcomed by the Brits as Britain needed help to reconstruct its shattered economy. So obviously after the devastation of the war, Britain needed all the help it could get to help rebuild its country. So all immigrants were welcome. And this allowed different cultures to be expressed. A final major phase of immigration took place between 1968 and 1974, when over 70,000 Kenyan, Ugandan and Asians arrived in Britain seeking refugee after their livelihoods had been threatened in those countries. By 1974 then, there were over 1 million black and Asian immigrants in Britain. So how certain ethnic groups are branded or labelled in sport? So the way I kind of see sport is you can have certain ethnic groups are labelled. So for example, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, cricket is their prominent sport, but it used to not be the case. It used to be a white middle class dominance for cricket, but that was changed in America, basketball and American football are regarded as the USA's national prominent sport. So obviously in America they make a big deal of their American football with tours around the UK for their fans, and then also you've got basketball as well. South America and Europe football, no qualms about it. Messi, you've got likes of Messi, Neymar, Ronaldo, most dominant figures in football, even sport. So we quote, sport can challenge as well as confirm social stereotypes. So this is a quote from Bookshire, 1988. One can observe, based on the evidence, that racial differences in performances are probably quite limited in comparison to the individual differences seen within each race. The trends currently observed in the world of elite athletes may have more to do with socio-economic condition than with the true biological differences between races. So, but why do people choose to participate in one sport over another? The answer to this is there are diverse as the number of sporting activities in the countries. People's choices are influenced by their parents, their friends, access, and barriers to different sports, cost, physical attributes, and the list goes on. There is one constant when it comes to sport. If participants find involvement in their sport a choice enjoyable and fulfilling, then they will be more likely to continue into their adult lives. An enjoyable early experience increases the chance of lifelong participation in that sport, be it as a player, coach, administrator or official. But things are kind of changing. As we know, the rise of the Chinese Super League is basically drawing the attention to Asia now. So the Chinese Super League was developed in 2004 with only 12 teams and now has developed into 16 teams. When the Chinese League was first formed in 2004, each team were only allowed to register three foreign players and 2 could play at the same time. In 2006 you were allowed 4 foreign players and 3 could play at the same time. teams in the Chinese Super League began to spend major money due to the uprising in their market. This allowed teams to buy high-profile players from high-profile teams. For example, Lavezzi from PSG, Oscar from Chelsea, Weiss, Hulk from Zenit St. Petersburg, and Didier Drogba. This is a sign of the future. Not only is the CSL taking Masterpiece as best place to slip into retirement, bottom line is the CSL is coming, and the MLS and Liga Mix better be prepared, as from Mark Young, March 1st, 2016. So basically, the Chinese Super League is becoming massive. There's no denying that. There's even been reports of them signing like Ronaldo, Messi, Diego Costa, and I think it will just grow and grow, and it will drag people's attention away from the West, which is usually known as the best place for football. And I think the Chinese Super League is looking to be even more dominant than European football. So, unfortunately, one of the major issues in sport, and I think it is still today, is racism in sport. Now, we've spoken about NFL, Donald Trump, but I want to look a bit more into European football. It has always been one of the biggest issues in sport, in particular European football. This could be due to ethnic opinions, different political views, and athletes' view. So for example, an athlete could maybe post something on social media regarding their religion or their heritage, and that can spark a bit of like flair within the fans who disagree with this opinion. So racism is a problem for football across Europe, and it is an important factor which results into football hooliganism itself. The attractions of football matches to far-right groups are obvious. Football grounds provide a usual platform for the groups to make their voices heard. From them, their views can be directed into millions of homes. So I think a great example of this as well was in Euro 2016 when Croatia were playing Bulgaria. When the match had to be stopped due to Croatian flares being flung due to hooligans' views on how the Football Association was run in Croatia. So it just shows you like millions of people watch mega events, football matches, so that's why hooliganism usually try and portray their views on where the cameras are, because they know millions are going to be watching. So I have a wee clip. I was going to, instead of going through writing UEFA rules and regulations, I decided to just upload the clip so you could have a look at the new kind of regulations that have been put in place from UEFA's point of view.
Well, I've done it all the time, sorry.
That's still going to be playing now.
Yeah, I was all I touched.
Les statuts de l'UEFA prévoient que l'un des objectifs principaux est de promouvoir le football en Europe.
En espíritu de paz, entendimiento y juego limpio, y sin discriminación de ningún tipo.
Asimismo, los 11 valores clave de la UEFA contienen el compromiso de que la UEFA
zu einer Null-Toleranz-Politik gegenüber Rassismus.
Weiter heißt es in diesen Werten, dass der Fußball mit gutem Beispiel vorangehen muss. Fußball eint die Völker und überkommt Unterschiede.
Como tal, o respeito é princípio crucial deste desporto.
Neste contexto, o futebol europeu está unido na sua profunda convicção.
Et la discrimination, sous toutes ses formes, doit être mise en jeu une fois pour toutes.
A UEFA e seus membros decidem redobrar o esforço para erradicar o racismo do futebol.
Deben imponerse sanciones más estrictas a toda forma de comportamiento racista que afecte el juego.
Referees should stop, suspend, or even abandon the match if racist incidents occur.
Seguendo le linee guida UEFA, articolate in 3 fasi, una partita sarà innanzitutto fermata e verrà diffuso un avvertimento al pubblico.
Second, the match will be suspended for a period of time.
In terzo luogo, qualora il comportamento razzista perduri, la partita verrà annullata, previo coordinamento con il personale incaricato alla sicurezza.
In such a case, the responsible team forfeits the time.
Aquellos jugadores o representantes del equipo que sean declarados culpables de comportamiento racista sufrirán una sanción mínima de 10 partidos.
Ou um período de tempo correspondente para os representantes dos clubes.
Caso os adeptos de clube ou de uma seleção nacional adoptem comportamentos racistas,
ist bei einem Erstvergehen mit einer teilweisen Platzsperre zu ahnden. Bei weiterer Teil der Tribüne, in dem der rassistische Vorfall stattfand, beschlossen bleibt.
Em caso de reincidência, o clube ou a seleção nacional serão punidos com um jogo à porta fechada e terão de pagar uma multa pecuniária.
Zudem sollten Fans, die rassistischen Verhaltens für schuldig befunden wurden, der weitere Besuch von Spielen von staatlicher Seite verboten werden.
إن على النوادي والفيدراليات الوطنية لكرة القدم الشروع في تنفيذ برامج توعية المكافحة العنصرية.
Furthermore, disciplinary sanctions for any racist behavior should be accompanied by such awareness programs, which anti-racism organizations could helpfully assist.
كما أن التعليم له دور كبير في محو هذه الظاهرات سواء في مجال كرة القدم أو داخل المجتمع المدني.
Igrači i treneri moraju također da budu lideri u borbi protiv rasizma.
人種差別撲滅運動のために声を上げよう。それは参加に携わる者の義務。
UEFA is fully committed to these strong sanctioning and awareness policies, and all national associations support to the implementation of similar policies, having regard to their own domestic circumstances.
El fútbol gira en torno al liderazgo, dentro y fuera del campo. El fútbol europeo está unido contra el racismo. Paremos el racismo, ahora.
So obviously that was a campaign by UEFA to try and express the seriousness of racism, and what better way to do it than to have Europe and the world's top best players to advertise that. So throughout Europe, racism figures prominently in football-related violence. Neo-Nazi and neo-fascist groups target football grounds in Europe in the same way as the English equivalents do here. Among the worst affected clubs are Lazio and AC Milan in Italy, Paris Saint-Germain in France, and Real Madrid and Espanyol in Spain. There's been several reports in Italy and in other countries about the treatment of certain ethnic players. So for example, you see here René Rochinelle, a Jewish player, was unable to play even one game for Indonesia because of the massive pressure from neo-fascist circles. It's kind of becoming quite common now. I don't think it is as bad as what it used to be, but certain players have been starting to take more of a stand. So if they hear any racist abuse, they feel the need, they just stop and they just walk off the pitch as a kind of defiant. So only a third of respondents felt that the campaigns of the CRE and the FSA were a factor. Nevertheless, all of the respondents were aware of the Let's Kick Racism Out football campaign. 44% felt that it had raised the public awareness of the problem of racism. So that leads us to Russia 2018. Now, as we know, Russia is hosting the World Cup next year, but the mega event is supposed to be a way to show culture. Now, this has put a lot of pressure on Russia. As the main issues facing Russia are hooliganism, racism, homophobia and poverty. Russia is not famous for its football, but its trouble with hooliganism. This is due to the influence of other European countries like Germany and Britain. So these Russian hooligans from CSK Moscow, which all started in the 2000s, they use the kind of examples from Germany and Britain's hooliganism and racial abuse as a kind of reason why they do it as well. So after the events during Euro 2016, questions have been raised about the safety and well-being of the public and visitors to Russia after the recent proportion documentaries suggest that Russian hooligans are ready for battle and not a football match. Sorry about that.
2018 FIFA World Cup, ladies and gentlemen, will be organized in
2018, Russia will host the FIFA World Cup, one of the biggest sporting events on the planet.
We are eager to do our best to secure the comfort and safety of our guests.
President Putin has promised peace, love and harmony. But at the European Championships in France, we saw a different side of Russian football. So what can fans expect of the host country if they travel to Russia in 2018? I'm going to Russia to meet the hooligans who hold the fate of England fans in their hands. Men who reject the negative image of the past to embrace a new identity. A football culture where violence is celebrated.
So, I don't know if any of you have seen the documentary, but I felt it kind of made me a bit nervous about watching even the World Cup, because I thought you've got all these ethnic groups from Asia, Africa, different religion. You've also got Britain who are going to Russia, and it looks as if there's been not really any development in Russia to help tackle the hooliganism problem. So authorities are not apprehensive about the troubles in Russia, as they illustrate new information points to help tackle hooliganism, so people can get information and how they've planned. There's plans in motion for them to tackle any troubles that might come up in Russia. Andrei Zakharov, the city's deputy chief of police, stated that in an interview, and it depends how authorities plan to tackle the threat of hooliganism. There are different degrees of violations, so we go on case-by-case basis. It's not like we're going to put someone on the plane for drinking a little bit too much. In any case, whatever they do and however we respond, we will always be polite and very respectful when handling them. So to drop my conclusion, I think ethnicity has developed over sport. It's definitely not as bad as what it used to be, but I think there is still certain areas that could be cleaned up with regards to hooliganism and other political views, and especially Eastern Europe. And that's my presentation.
Okay, some questions for Jack?
See how you were saying about China?
Hand up, no?
Sorry.
You
You know, you were saying about China and how it first started out that a certain amount of players could play. Is that still the case with them having a certain amount, or is it now just open?
I think it's just now open, so it is. Because I think it's the kind of people that run the CSL are seeing that now they're getting a lot of attention by buying these players. So I think now they're just open to buy more players. And I think it's ridiculous. We see the wages as well. I mean, some of these players are actually the most paid footballers in the world.
Yes, Jack. I'm going to ask you, I mean, what's your take on this? Obviously you've shown us a clip about, what UEFA or what CONCACAF is already drafted and is planning to do to kick the habit of racism out of football. But in your response or in your views, do you think that's enough? Because, for me what I'm seeing is just a trend, ongoing. They're drafting all these rules and regulations, but when it comes to punishments or punitive measures, do you think that's enough really to kick racism out of football?
I think UEFA should, obviously we've seen the past couple of years, the closure of, they have closed the stadiums if they feel there's been inappropriate language used by football fans or inappropriate demonstrations, games played behind closed doors. But I think sometimes it depends on the profile of a team. So I think that's an issue that should be brought up in UEFA. So like, for example, you're seeing like the smaller teams like Warsaw or Moscow getting like punished, but if anything like that happened for like Man United or Real Madrid, you don't see them getting punished. So I think that should be an issue, that like everyone should be treated fairly. It doesn't matter what size your budgets are or how big your team profile is. You should always, every team should be treated fair.
Okay, I was going to follow up on Toshi's point, because I guess there's been a big debate around about football about the idea of strict liability, that actually if there's kind of incident, the clubs are responsible, and therefore you start with that principle that if it's your fans or whatever that are responsible, then you're responsible as a club. What are the kind of impediments to that being put into practice? Because UEFA's got lovely principles and you wouldn't disagree with any of them, but it is about how do you actually make that happen in such a way that there are that actually someone can pursue that to a point where someone's responsible, and therefore they've got to take the hit. And then I guess the argument is that that will make them really address more educated way to actually their findings.
Well, what Russia's doing in building for the 2018 is they're doing security kind of passes, so identification cards, so they can tell if any trouble starts, or if it's like started by this group, or if they know about a background, about a history of this fan, then who's used to starting trouble in football grounds, then they can punish them for it. So I think maybe that could even be brought up in UEFA. But I definitely think that there could be more done. I mean, obviously they're just showing football stars and hoping that that's going to help make a difference, but sometimes it doesn't, and that's an unfortunate case.
And my second question is related to, I guess, it seems to me some of the main issues around about race, in particular racism in sport, is that there's a kind of everyday racism, and just like an everyday sexism. That means that it's not overly high profile, it's not kind of way out there in such a way that in the public profile people think that's completely unacceptable. It's the small things, it's the subtleties, and at one point, I think on the clip it says people should speak out, or need to speak out about it.
Yeah.
How do you speak out about it if you're within a culture, within, it could be in a dressing room, it could be in a circumstance where it's, things are said, they're not necessarily perceived to be just really, really bad, but there's an undercurrent of racism in there. How would you deal with that? Because it seems that might be the biggest issue.
I think it's more like education-wise. I think managers might need to take responsibility, and owners might need to take responsibility and like educate their players and saying, right, this is not actually okay to say this, or to joke about this. So like, obviously, don't know if anyone's been involved with a football team, like obviously a bit of banter and stuff can get carried away, stuff can be said that may not be meant to be said but can still be hurtful to that person. So I think there's definitely needs to be an education on players in sport in general, not just football but in sport in general, because when I was researching there was like quotes like saying like the way players like shout at each other, like I'm not going to say the words, but like it was quite like bad what they were shouting. So I think there definitely needs to be an education.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much, Jack. Okay, next we've got Kieran. Just going to run away. He's literally run away at that point.
I think it's the exact same as last week.
I tried to, but we've gone for just in the nature of the questions on the asked in chat.
Alright, so my topic is sports development and peace. And first and foremost, the UN, United Nations, actually have its own department, its own office for development and peace. Essentially, it's the UN body looking at how sport can be used to enhance communities and relations in countries around the world. Like the UN, it's based in Geneva, but it's supported by an office in New York, where it says its ambitions and its objectives are bringing the worlds of sport and development closer together. The office was introduced in 2001 to coordinate the efforts undertaken by the United Nations in promoting sport in an efficient way as a means to contribute to the achievement and development, the achievement of development and peace. And the current UN Special Advisor on Sport for Development and Peace is a guy called Wilfred Lemke. That's the fellow up there, corner. And his mandate is first of all to advocate, so to lead and coordinate the efforts of the United Nations system to promote the understanding and support amongst UN member states and other actors for sport as a tool to attain humanitarian development and peace building objectives. To facilitate, so to encourage dialogue, collaboration and partnerships around sport development and peace between the United Nations and its member states, the international and national sports organisations of the world like FIFA and the Olympics, civil society, the private sector, academics and of course the media. And finally, to represent the Secretary General of the United Nations at important global sports events and other key meetings. Its main partners involved in its objectives for development and peace is the International Olympic Committee, the International Judo Federation, the International Volleyball Federation, UEFA and the International Paralympic Committee. Its projects that it's currently undertaking is its Youth Leadership Programme, which supports young volunteers by working in communities who normally have low education and limited resources by providing training to enhance their own projects within those communities and their own personal and professional development. In 2010 it was awarded the UEFA Monaco Charity Award, in which it was awarded €1 million to spend on basically how it's all fit, but it decided to spend this money on 5 new sport and development and peace projects covering 5 areas including gender, peace, health, education and disability, over 5 geographical regions over 4 years, so from 2011 to 2015. And in 2011, former Real Madrid and Spain goalkeeper Iker Casillas, along with Wilfred Lemke, launched its a comic book, a 32-page comic book, which is essentially an educational resource, and it features 10 football stars who become shipwrecked on an island with a group of ordinary people, and the group is then finally rescued thanks to their teamwork, the resources and their ability to address key challenges such as discrimination, environmental challenges and sickness. It also has a Sport Development and Peace Day, which is on the 8th and 6th of April every year, this was also first introduced in 2013, and it signifies the increasing recognition by the UN of the positive influence that sport can have on the advancement of human rights and social and economic development. And the UN General Secretary Ban Ki-moon has said that sport has become a world language, a common denominator that breaks down all of the walls, all the barriers. It's a worldwide industry whose participants can have widespread impact. Most of all, it's a powerful tool for progress and for development. Of course, the UN isn't the only body who specialises or wants to focus on sports development and peace. The Commonwealth, of course, who run and organise the Commonwealth Games, assist member countries to develop policies and frameworks that link support to outcomes in areas such as health, education, gender equality and social cohesion. It also offers technical assistance, which is available to member countries to develop national policies and strategies to maximise the contribution of sport to the national development objectives of that country. And it focuses on the intentional use of sport as a tool in advancing sustainable development, and governments within those countries, like again gender equality and the protection and promotion of human rights in sport. FIFA also has done a lot of work regarding international development and peace as far as football in this case is concerned. It has its own diversity award, and in 2016 it was presented for the first time that this award was awarded. It was presented to a group from India, a programme called Slum Soccer, which basically helped unite the people, solidarity, and and really the equality in the community of which that group was working. So they were the first recipients of that award last year. It also has its own conference as well, the FIFA Conference for Equality and Inclusion. And in March this year, at the home of FIFA in Switzerland, again the third meeting of this conference, the FIFA Conference for Equality and Inclusion brought together some of the world's strongest voices in the fight for a fair society. This year it was themed in making equality a reality. So the conference representatives identified many ways in which steps could be taken, and the need of which had to be taken, particularly close to the existing gap between men and women. And they also last year had at the Under-20s Women's World Cup had this End Violence campaign, so of which there's a little video to help explain it a little bit better.
I want you to be proud of where you're from. I also want you, when you walk out here, to remember where you are from.
What is the vision? It helps unite people. It helps create teamwork.
We're talking about a topic today that is very interesting, and is quite new to the family system. Gender-based violence that starts in the homes.
I lived in Paraguay. My mother left when I was doing my grade 6. He's strong, and so when he's mad, he'll just get up and beat me. Every night, I just want my mom to come back with us. I learned a lot about communication, health and hygiene, customer service, ambition, vision, values. Opportunity comes one side, spread it.
One of the things I think that's important to take away from that video is that, obviously, apart from the very personal story that you heard from the guy who won the video, is that as well as sports development and peace being, coming from such a large body like the UN and large football, like sports organisations like FIFA and football, for instance, it's very much a programme that works at grassroots level. Obviously in communities and the such deprived areas to help them, try and promote themselves, the area and the sport as well. Of course, major sporting events like the FIFA World Cup promise to bring huge benefits to host countries, particularly those that don't have the infrastructural benefits and advancements that perhaps other countries do. And when tournaments are awarded, the winning country can bring such huge economic benefits, infrastructure improvements, as well as vast employment opportunities for the citizens of that country before, during and after the games take place. And this quote here from Ike in 2011 says that FIFA sets the rules and regulations before, during and after these events. Even more, FIFA holds the monopoly of the World Cup and everything associated with the event. So the World Cup, like the Olympics, is manifestations and of a festivalisation of city politics. We're delegating all financial risks are given to the host cities and host nations, and that festivalisation leaves behind a cultural, economic, environmental, legal, political and social and sporting legacy. Furthermore, I think one of the important things about especially large events like the World Cup is that it doesn't always help. It doesn't help the infrastructure and the opportunities for the citizens of that country. Also, but it can actually develop relations between countries. So in the 2002 World Cup between Korea and Japan, one of the greatest benefits from this was the mutual understanding developed between Korea and Japan, as the two countries obviously were joint hosts. Japan residents developed a stronger understanding of the Korean culture, and the majority of the participants and perceptions and stereotypes that they possessed about Koreans weakened. Alternatively, Korean residents reported that they felt Japanese should have really been part of their games, but appreciated the improved relationship nonetheless. That's kind of my point. But I think going back to that again, I think it underlines the importance that not just out with the country, it can actually help relations on a national, international scale.
Okay, do we have some questions for Kieran?
What are the reasons why Korea were really happy with Japan?
I think it was more of a cultural thing. I think it's the best way I think to describe it would be like the way the Scottish perceived English and vice versa. You know, there's just that kind of natural cultural disagreement that maybe came between the two nations. But as you've seen, that from one side anyway, that seemed to improve slightly through the course of the World Cup.
Yes, Mike. I saw you've been showing us a lot of stuff, what the United Nations is trying to do, the sports department and everything. But in your own opinion, as a human being, don't you think that they are running a danger over giving people false hopes, especially people in the underdeveloped world? Because if you're telling me that you're training people for 32 days for an event that is only going to be for 30 days, thereafter what's next? What's the legacy?
Yeah, I think that could be said with a lot of sporting big events as well. For instance, the 2010 World Cup in South Africa and in Brazil in 2014, there was a lot of promise that infrastructure. For instance, South Africa, there was promises made that would bring more water to the South African people. There are still questions today as well that promise and that potential is being fulfilled. My honest opinion is probably not. And again in Brazil, where the favelas, and they were trying to eradicate all the problems there before the games arrived. To this day, again, the problems you could argue are if not maybe bigger, if not than what they were before. So there's definitely always more you can do, I think.
Thanks, man.
Those issues.
Thank you.
Do you think this concept's needed? Because I think there's always this argument that there's enough mix between sport and politics, and you've got all these big international sporting groups jumping in bandwagon, maybe the government should be doing,
That's what I'm going to say. I think it's important for such a large, important organisation like the UN to kind of lead the way, but I think, I agree, I think each individual government should be taking a lot of responsibility for their own communities, their own nations, their own people, as far as this issue is concerned.
I mean, I guess the argument is that some of these big sports organisations have a way of reaching people, of communicating with them through the vehicle of sport, whether it's football or another sport. So Is it that for example, would you argue that that just doesn't work, or that it's the way that they're structured or the way that they operate that means it doesn't work? It might mean some of the criticism that maybe Martin's referring to.
I think possibly. For instance, as far as the World Cup's concerned, we've seen the issues that's kind of hit FIFA in the last few years with corruption and stuff like that. So I think it maybe possibly go down to the way in which the run, the way in which these kind of organisations are set up, and the way in which they go about their business.
And I guess secondly, is there any sense that someone like, could be the IOC, could be FIFA, get quite a hard time on this? Because in some ways they do spend significant amounts of money supporting development projects around the world. And that's why Sepp Blatter was able to keep his power for so long. But they do actually spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the way they generate the money is through the FIFA World Cup or the Olympic Games, and that they've become in some ways so toxic that people think, well, that's, how contradictory is it that you've got at one level a games that exploits a host and takes the money out, and then at other level you're giving it to the people who apparently really need it. So do you think it's almost like more a PR issue that's caused these organisations problems, because they are doing some pretty good work probably?
Possibly, but I think if you're looking to perhaps not eradicate, but to certainly improve the problem, I think again you have to look at, well, governments in each individual country has to look at what they are doing as well to you know, it's not all, it doesn't just rely on these big massive sporting organisations or events to help with these problems. I think it's a relationship based on both ways.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have Paul. Paul. Did you say the water change?
Press the button now. What? What? Joy, I had a couple of jobs yesterday. Jobs. Get out of here. Jesus.
What's happening?
I don't know. Any ideas?
And I got my pen drive out, I accidentally pushed the reset button.
Switch the computer off.
My accident.
I went to log back.
That's fine, I'll just run away.
Where's Johnny? Can you use the time to fill in your feedback forms if you want to do the evaluation questionnaire? That was correct.
Hi, Callum, was basically looking at ethics / managerial research ethics application. Zero notification.
Okay, so my presentation is on sports and health, and before I jump into it and start going down the road of a lot of other people who've been sports is great for health and stuff, we'll cover a lot of that at the start. First thing I'm going to do is get someone used to shout out why sports is good for people's health, so any reason you can think, just shout them at me.
Exercise.
Social inclusion is positive for sport and health.
Cool. So, yeah, it decreases the likelihood of conditions such as heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, cancer, obesity through exercise. Also improves mental health by releasing endorphins, which combats depression, anxiety, attention disorders, and also social inclusion, so you get to interact with your friends and other people and stops you feeling lonely. So, a couple of quotes here. Those who participate regularly in sporting activities significant higher levels of general health than non-participants, with the average daily duration of participation being positively and significantly related to self-reported health. And that's from Farrell and Shields. And then regular physical activity is associated with an increased psychological well-being and a more positive mood states and reduced anxiety levels. So, as I said, I'm just going to cover that slightly to start there. What I'm going to cover mostly in this topic is the professional sports and health and some of the reasons that it can be detrimental to people So obviously professional sports is great for people's health, but there are other sides to it. So massive amount of injuries compared to normal workplaces. Mental health issues related to professional sports, such as people who get injuries and then can't continue to play, forced early retirement, and then they're obviously put in low moods, depression and stuff, because that's all they've worked to their whole life. And then traumatic brain injuries in places like the National Football League, and also we're talking a little bit about on head the ball and the debate that has come up quite largely in football in Scotland and the rest of the UK. So an elite athlete pushing their body harder, and it does make injuries more likely. There'll always be a risk of freak accidents or an undetected heart condition, such as we've seen some football players have heart attacks on the pitch, etc. An investigation conducted last year, 2016, by the Pittsburgh Tribune in the States assessed that NFL injury rate is 68%. Now for a sport, everybody can agree that's probably one of the highest and really, really high. 2014, nearly 600 rugby players in England and 13% experienced concussion. It's the most common injury in rugby in the past 3 years, but there's obviously major issues with neck injury and stuff in rugby as well. And the overall level of injury to professional football has recently been shown at around 1,000 times higher than those working in industrial occupations, which again is quite a stunning fact. So just a little bit about the mental health of people who are forced to retire from football early and it's all they've worked to in their career. There's a report out from a group called Mind that identifies 3 main mental health pressure points for those in elite sports. And this one focuses in on football, so I'm just going to play a little bit of this that explains.
A few months ago, the World Players Union published a study that revealed that mental health issues are significantly more widespread amongst current and former footballers than the general population. Their research identified injuries and the subsequent isolation of players from their clubs as one of the leading causes for these issues. On that same day, members of the newly formed Mental Health Charter gathered at Wembley Stadium to discuss how they can tackle mental health in each of their respective sports, and more importantly, reverse the stigma around it.
The Mental Health Charter for Sport and Recreation was created in March of this year, really as an opportunity for sports organisations to be able to pledge their support to concerns about mental health and actually sign up to doing something about it.
I'm in support of it because my own personal journey with mental ill health has been well documented. I am so aware not only of the power of sport, but also the prevalence of the issue within sportsmen and women.
Last year, Mind did a report into professional sports people to look at their mental health and well-being, and identified that there are 3 touch points when athletes struggle in their career. So when they retire, when they leave or exit the game, and they struggle in silence.
Covenanti attended the day-long event to see what leaders in football are doing to systematically support mental well-being among their players, and ask what fans can do to spark a cultural shift in attitudes.
There was a need for players to have the option to talk about stuff. I think what we found was that people forget that footballers are people first, then footballers, and then when people after leave the game.
The academy structure, for example, so children coming into academies very young, it's their whole life, their whole social network is fixated around the club, and then if they become injured or if at 21 they don't make it, their whole hopes, dreams and aspirations, their career prospects, their friendship networks are gone.
I think a lot of the onus is put on the physical aspect of the players, but not enough done on the emotional side of things.
What it is about football is that it gives you an identity. My own identity was inextricably linked with the sport. So when that's taken away, my identity, or a huge part of it, was also taken away with it.
It's absolutely crucial that players are supported when they're coming up to retirement.
It becomes easier when you're educated in how to be able to identify your self-esteem and your worth and your value in life without it being attributed to something else.
So, automatically cut a little bit short there, but so yeah, the 3 touch points. You've got leaving the sport. If players connected to football academies age 16, the majority will no longer be playing professional football by the age of 21. Bad performance by an individual athlete may mean that it's suddenly being dropped altogether and a withdrawal of the funding that they've been receiving. And this can cause some serious mental issues because the entire social network and everything that's been keeping them together as a person is linked to them playing for that club or a club that may pick them up after they become professional. Retirement, so players approaching retirement are particularly challenged for most sports people who spend their entire lives being defined by their sport. When they retire, they struggle to find something to give them sustenance. The entire world has been that sport, everyone associates them with it. They've been in the spotlight, what do they do now? And then struggling in silence. So you've got athletes who have played and still competing who have expressed concerns about the impact of revealing and asking for support for mental health issues. Problems can have on their career, showing that there's clearly a sign of a stigma attached to mental health problems within sports. So moving on to pretty much the big one for me as an NFL fan is the CTE, which is a neurological disease found in people who have multiple head injuries. The symptoms are ADHD, memory loss, impulsive behaviour, dementia, depression, thoughts of suicide and increased aggression. So a researcher studied 165 deceased people who played NFL at high school, college or professional level in American football and found evidence of CTE, so it's something they can test for in the brain once someone's deceased, 131 of them. There's no question that there's a problem in football, which American football, that people who play football are at risk of this disease, and that's from Dr. Anne McGee, who's the director of the Boston University's CTE Research Centre. 2016, so it came to light that the NFL had tried to influence concussion research by steering studies towards league-affiliated scientists and by trying to cut the funding opportunities for scientists who are being critical of the league. On November 15th of this year, CTE was confirmed for the first time in a living person, a former NFL player. The scan was published in a report, again by the Chicago Tribune, as well as multiple other news sources, and the research was done by Dr. Julian Bales at North Shore Neurosurgeon. If there's ever a treatment developed, you can test the response to it. So they actually found what they thought was the start of CTE in a person through neurological scans, and that was last year. And this year he actually passed away, so they tested his brain, and what they thought was CTE, they actually found to be CTE. We're now able to start developing a cure or some way to maybe stop it. And if you can trust the scans, you can tell a football player he shouldn't be playing, or tell someone in the military that they can't be exposed to explosions. CTE is not only American football, it's people in the military, people in wrestling, people in loads of sports where you're taking constant impact on your body and your brain's basically bouncing around inside your skull. Moving on to head trauma in the F1. So in 2016 the FIA released a report on Jules Bilicci's death that reported that all the data supplied by the sensors on his helmet and his crashed vehicle, that his head suffered the impact of 254 Gs. That is the equivalent of dropping the car from 48 metres high to the ground at the speed that an F1 car goes. So in F1 and F2 are still some of the three motorsports in the world that have open cockpits. The other two are being IndyCar and the National Hot Rod Association's top division in the USA. All the other divisions from that actually are closed cockpit. So the F1 are introducing the controversial Halo head protection system, set outcries from fans, drivers and teams. Niki Lauda said this is an overreaction that's destroyed the good work the F1 has done by introducing faster and more dramatic cars this year. That was last year he said that, because that's when they started testing the Halo device. It's a titanium roll cage that's fitted to the front and side of the cars, and it protects the driver from debris from the track, so anything's flicking up off other cars, and it also from the car, it acts as a buffer between the driver's head when the car rolls. And that's what it looks like. I don't know if anyone's an F1 fan, if they have an opinion on it, but I'll ask you later on. So that comes to heading the debate, heading the ball debate. In December 2016, so last year, the Professional Football Association, the Youth Professional Football Association suggested a ban on heading the ball for children under 10 from football's governing bodies. It's the same ruling that was passed in the USA, and the University of Stirling also concluded a study on it, which is where the Scottish Youth FA had pulled their data from. In a statement it said, "It would be a statement that might encourage a greater attention to this issue with regard to developed adults. There have been rules changed for youngsters about pitches they're playing on, about the number in the game, and whether or not girls should be involved with boys and up to what age. It is very much in line with what we don't want to put off for the next generation, but we do want to be very mindful that the game needs to have a duty of care to all its participants." So the Scottish Youth FA have promised that they'd have a more in-depth look at the research from Stirling Uni. The study from Stirling Uni reported a reduced memory performance for 41 to 67% of players who'd headed the ball after 24 hours, and that was heading the ball 20 times with the pace of a power of the corner kick. Memory function did return to normal after 24 hours though. It's a problem that's not limited to children. There are calls for investigations into ball heading if caused head trauma that have been linked to early onset dementia, most notably recently the Dundee United player Frank Coppola, who was diagnosed at 59 with dementia and died last year at 65. In 2017, so this year, research from the College of London studied 14 retired football players who died having been diagnosed with dementia, and 12 of the 14 of them had advanced dementia. The neurological symptoms began in midlife, only 15 to 20 years following the retirement from play. 4 of those brains also showed CTE. So heading produces a so-called contra-coup head injury. So the ball strikes the head, and even if it is protected by a helmet, the kinetic energy is transmitted to the brain, which is floating within your skull cavity, and it bounces basically around like a ping pong ball, back and forth. Other reports run counteractive to everything I've just said, saying, "We do not know for certain whether heading the ball in soccer may result in chronic cognitive impairment. It is unlikely that subconscious impacts such as the head and the ball contact will cause chronic neurological injury." And that's from a report by Paul Roy in 2003, which is a little outdated, but it does run counteractive to what's been said now. So, in conclusion, for the NFL, from what I've read and studied, the links to CTE in former NFL players are pretty clear. I think it would be advisable for the league to take into account the data and admit that this is something that's caused by playing sport, and look into ways to help reduce the number of players who are affected. As a fan, I don't really think the sport will ever change or be stopped, because the hitting each other is, and the force and trauma is a way the game is played, and pretty much why it's so enjoyable to watch. In the F1, I think while it's controversial and a change to the way the sport has run for years, it's best for the safety of the drivers that the halo's there. It'll take some getting used to for the drivers, teams and fans, but overall I don't think it's going to make any significant changes to the speed of the cars or the viewing experience. And ball heading, which I know most of you will have some big opinions on, the research and report is that new topics is still for the debate almost weekly. Until it can be proven one way or another, I think that kids under the age of 12 from heading the ball is a good idea to protect the next generation. As for a professional level of game, I think much like boxing, wrestling, NFL or any other sport that has issues in head trauma, most of the players have access to the research, can make their own decisions before taking on the career path in football. And until there's a 100% link between head and the ball, brain injury, CTE, the governing bodies in football just won't act. So just round up, sports are important for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. They help prevent disease. There's also an outlet for frustration and anger in children and adults. Those seeking professional sports as a career path should research the sport they're interested in and possible related health risks within the sport. And they should also have a backup career and path to fall back on should they not make it. And governing bodies in sport definitely have a duty to their players to make sure the sport is as safe as possible and that players have access to all the physical and mental health care that they should need. And that's me. If there are any questions. Question from Paul. Josh.
Yes, sir. Just gonna pick up on what you talked about there. The video that you showed us, whereby people are suffering from mental health, after either retiring from football or after their careers are not successfully flourished or taken on.
Yeah.
Don't you think that basically what's happening is like they're running a danger in misadvising the young ones to go to academies instead of advising them to get their education first, so much so that they have something to fall on back before just relying on academies or football? Because as human beings, we should be multifaceted.
Yeah,
want
no.
to be that an athlete without any sort of like vocational qualification.
I definitely agree with you that they should definitely be getting their education first and having a backup plan should football or other sports not work out for them. Unfortunately, that's not the way a lot of those kids see it, because that's basically all they live for. But it's definitely something that these academies and sports people who are funding them should be saying, look, you need to get your education on top, so if your grades drop below a certain level, you know what, we're going to make you study more rather than let you play more.
Yeah, I was just thinking, do you think the media should take more of a responsibility in the way they portray sports with regards to like head knocks and stuff? Like you look at the NFL and rugby, like when kind of big games come around, like it'll be promoted with like all like top 10 biggest hits and things like that, and some of them might be illegal or anything. Do you think they're more of a, they should have like kind of an obligation to kind of try like stomp out kind of foul play and big hits like that?
Yeah, I definitely think they should have a duty to not kind of glorify that stuff. The NFL, the commentators are pretty good about pointing out that that was an illegal hit, that should have been a call from the refs or stuff like that. The NFL, the league itself, isn't really willing to admit it because their entire sport and viewership is based on people taking big hits, more or less. So I think the media do have a duty to kind of not run stuff of, hey, here's the top 10 most brutal hits of the NFL year or whatever. I think that's probably bad.
Just on that practical sense, what can the NFL actually do to prevent head trauma? Because it just seems so linked with the sport in terms of the hitting aspect, whereas in Formula 1 you can do stuff and try to combat it.
Yeah, I kind of tried to touch on that in my conclusions of the NFL. As a fan, I don't think they can really do much. I don't want to see the sport change entirely for the safety of the players. It's been noted that helmets, as of late, are actually part of the cause of some of the trauma they take, because their heads bouncing around inside the helmets, but I think the game's safe enough to not have the helmets on. No, not with some of the hits. As for what the NFL can do, I honestly really don't know. Without entirely changing the way the sport is to view, the way the sport's played, I really don't see what they can do. I think it's just down to the people who want to play, to research that stuff and know they're taking that risk. But with a lot of NFL players, it's they're way out of kind of where they're living or bad situations, so a lot of them playing can't choose to not take the risk.
I think that seems to me to be a really important point you just mentioned, which is that, you know, who are the professional sports people who have been for a long time, perhaps in some cases been putting themselves at risk, to sometimes to the profit of others, organisations, employers actually, who have then actually, as you said in the NFL, perhaps kind of tried to kind of undermine, and that message has been important. So you mentioned that sport organisations have a duty of care, and I'm interested in how can they be expected or required to fulfil that duty of care if they don't just actually have to accept they have to change sports. F1 did change, didn't it? Because Jackie Stewart was a kind of, but they pushed on the driver's behalf to say that it's unacceptable to go into a situation where you're putting your life at risk because of poor safety standards.
I think in the cases of the NFL and such stuff as hitting the ball, that the association behind it and the leagues behind it need to just accept what the research is saying. If the research is getting to the point where it's near enough showing and proving undoubtedly, they need to stop trying to like push it off and make their own scientists say, oh no, that's not a problem. They've got a duty of care to the league, like their players. So in terms of the NFL, I think they should have healthcare. All players in the NFL pay for their own healthcare. The league and the teams do not pay for their healthcare, and I think that should definitely be something that's changed. With the amount of money that is in the NFL, they can afford to pay for the healthcare of their players and for the aftercare of the players who are injured to a point where they can no longer play.
And I guess my second question was around about this kind of idea of harm. So, you know, sport and doping often is the organisations that wish to avoid doping will suggest that one of the reasons is because it causes harm for the athlete, that the athlete is putting themselves in a position of harm.
Yeah.
But yet on the other side, when they're actually playing their sport, maybe put themselves at harm, they're unwilling to accept that that's worthy of some kind of intervention or regulation. So is that just about sport being kind of contradictory, actually?
It's a lot of the players, like a lot of the governing bodies, can be very contradictory. They say stuff that helps them, but if it's going to look bad on them or portray them terribly to the public and the people who basically pay their wages and funnel the money in, they're going to be contradictory.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the two left, we have Callum up next.
Yeah, I think they're engaging and kind of answer like this.
No, maybe. It's a cool target.
It was good.
Download it, Cash. Aye, it is.
Yeah, see, yeah, on download again, it was coming up like it was saying it's a hard I don't know if that'll make it. See, yeah,
Save it, save desktop and then
yeah, text on
and then just open it for there.
Students getting home early tonight as well. No, or getting home early on the side.
or not, you know.
Please, if you've completed your valuation forms, there's an envelope at the front, which you can just drop it into, so that you don't see them. That's 5 minutes of your time, not already.
You'll do that, market, pressure.
You guys better let us know, right? Yeah, so my topic is sport and young people. And for those of you that don't know me, my name's Callum. And there's a lot I kind of focused on young people. I originally thought about looking at the health benefits that young people in sport, how good that is, but thankfully I didn't, which is good when I've seen Paul's presentation before me. So I'm looking at youth participation in sport. So mainly looking at the kind of 13 to 21 age group, which is the teenage age bracket, and that's where there's a massive drop-off in sports. That's going to be the main theme of the day. After that, I'm going to look at young girls' participation in sport. Of course, Toshi's already done a great PowerPoint on gender in sports, so I'll try not to step on his toes, but there's a massive correlation between sports dropout with teenagers and young girls. Then I'm going to go one step further and show you where I've used my own research and put into a lot into practice, a lot of the kind of the theory behind youth participation. And then we'll have some academic evaluation of that and just finish with what we've learned in a conclusion. So firstly, what is a sport? Well, we've had the best part of a month where everyone's standing up and telling us what the definition of a sport is. So Lewis, what is a sport?
Physical activity.
And anything to add? Physical activity? Competitive.
Yeah, I think sports, sport, I would define it as something that involves both your body and mental capabilities. Though we always take it for granted that sport is only a physical thing, but it also involves your mental capabilities or capacities if necessary.
Yeah, perfect. You don't need to go far to find out the dictionary definition of what a sport is. A simple Google search will do. Of course, it's there as an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. Of course, there's a blurred line between physical exertion, certainly when you look at darts and stuff like that, but that's an argument for another day. Secondly, another meaning of a sport is a person who behaves in a good or specified way in response to teasing, defeat or particularly trying situation. So thank you, Lewis, for being a good sport there, and Toshi, Callum. So yeah, looking at team participation, I mentioned there was a big drop-off. It's just a couple of things. Around 70% of kids in the United States stop playing organised sports by the age of 13 because it's just not fun anymore. And that's from a quote from the National Alliance of Youth Sports. And another big drop-off point is around 17-18, so that's also in the bracket that we're looking at. That's a second drop-off point, and that's when kids leave school, because those that are, the small minority that are still involved in getting enough physical exercise at school, once they leave, they drop off because they've got further education or they're in a working environment, so they simply don't have time to. And then lastly, there's a quote there, there's been a major change in the way teens partake in sports, which is quite interesting. The increasing popularity of lifestyle sports, both absolutely and in relation to more traditional activities such as team games, which has led to big increases in participation in lifestyle sports such as organised walking, weight training, things like that. So people going to the gym and stuff is looking kind of more sought after in young people now rather than playing basketball or something like that in PE. Then looking at young girls' participation in sport now, it's big to kind of point this out because although there is a drop off between boys, there's a massive one in girls. 12% of girls aged 14 get enough physical activity, which also means 88% don't, which is really worrying. But in contrast to that, 76% of girls say they want to do more sport. So why are they not? And it really becomes down to the second point there from Slidden Tiggerman about kind of stigma and girls reports feeling like they were crossing traditional gender boundaries when playing sport, particularly for sports traditionally classed as masculine. Additional concerns related to teammates and teasing as well, and concerns about appearance in sport and image while playing sports. That really kind of shows you there's a stigma young girls feel that there is in school, and that leads them to drop off. And as Ross said earlier, back in school, I remember people that always forgot their kit week in, week out. Yeah, and now I'm going to talk a wee bit about myself. I was able to kind of put this theory into practice in summer. I'm sure a lot of people in the class are fed up hearing me talk about New Zealand, but I watched for the British and Irish Lions, so I thought a tour in New Zealand to play the All Blacks, and I went across, and my role as Scottish Ambassador was to look at their grassroots game. So that heavily involved sport at a local level, and in particular sports participation, which is what we're talking about today. So one of the ways we've done that was a fan engagement event. We hosted 3 in New Zealand, 1 in Auckland, Hamilton and Christchurch, and the idea of that was to get travelling Lions fans and All Blacks fans, local kind of club people, to meet together, look at what kind of their troubles they're facing and troubles that we face back home with participation, and is there anything they're doing that we can implement, and vice versa, and just kind of learn of each other. So this is a news package I made just to give you an idea of the event, and it's this is from Hamilton.
Start very shortly. If I could ask all the people, the hardcore at the bar that sit at the back of the room, if they could take a seat at one of the round tables.
When we walked in here and looked at the memorabilia and the club boards, it's great to get out of some of these model stadiums and get down and dirty with a proper rugby club. So thank you very much for hosting us.
It's one of 4 events that we're putting on New Zealand Rugby in conjunction with the British and Irish Lions management. Steve Granger from the RFU to try and bring some good Kiwi top people together, give them an opportunity to meet firstly some good top people from the British and Irish Lions sport, but also the chance to sit down and discuss some of the issues facing the club game, but I think more importantly try and find some solutions.
Some things that are very different. The things that are different, I think, obviously the size of the tour. In 1961 we played 26 matches over 3.5 months, so it was pretty tough. I was only 23 and I thought it was tough. I was fit. We had a care with a manager and a coach, and now we have a support staff of 41.
We're hoping really to get some ideas about what's working in New Zealand and pass on to New Zealand some ideas about what's working back in England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. We all share the same challenges and we're all in this together to try and find some solutions.
Yeah, so that was a news package I filmed, and this is over there in Hamilton in PowerPoint. And the last guy talking there, Steve Granger, was head of development for RFU, which is the biggest rugby union, the first ever one that was made. He kind of nailed it in the head. The whole idea was to get ideas and compare them, what are we facing. So what we found out about their grassroots game and their youth participation, was that their grassroots system in New Zealand is different to what it is in Scotland completely. When you go to secondary school in New Zealand, there's no clubs to play sport. Certainly over here, if you play football or rugby or whatever it is, your main outlet for that is at club, and then you'll maybe play it at school as well. Over there they don't. It's very competitive. You play club rugby up until 11, or football, and then you play all in school until you graduate, then you go back to your club. But there's no outlet for sport at all outside of school between the ages of 11 up until 18. And that's just the kind of, so you go there after school, you go back to your club, and if you're good enough you go to professional. So that's very good if you're one of the best players in the world, because it's a more kind of progressive movement, whereas you see people in Scotland and that, you think might just play for fun, might kind of fall through the cracks if they're not in pro youth or whatever when they're 14, 15 years old, if they peak later on when they're 20 or they've missed the trip and they're not going to go anywhere. So that's a bit of a transition, but certainly it brings out its own dropout issues, because basically what happens is the majority of people play sport just socially. They're not going to be superstars, they're not the top tier, and they don't want to play competitive. So if they don't want to do that, they have to drop away from the sport, and then there's no other outlet for it. So although it's a completely different look at sport and a completely different system that they have, it's the exact same outcome, that people between the ages of 12 to 21 are dropping out of sport. So it's a real issue, and we have to try to tackle it together. And that's just a study at the University of Auckland which backs up my own research, just to kind of give it a bit more kind of academic value. And this found that sport for youngsters in New Zealand was mainly results based, catered for the top tier of talent, which allowed people of lesser ability to fall away from the sport. So this is just a kind of brief overview of what we've learned. We've learned that youth participation in sport declines at around 13-14 when teams move into secondary school. There's a secondary drop-off point at 17-18 when those people who were involved in sports leave school for a job or further education. And then there's been a culture shift in the way teens engage with sport now, that they're not playing traditional sports, so it's kind of hard to kind of gauge what physical activity they're doing at school. Because if they go into the gym, they'll be going hill walking and things like that, which aren't seen as kind of your team sports. And then the teenage dropout is a lot worse in young women due to kind of the stigma, the kind of self-consciousness they feel in sport. And then lastly, the independent research taking place in New Zealand by myself and the Lions shows that even with an entirely different grassroots system and a completely different approach, that this is global, this issue is impacting everything and everywhere. And as well with the point of the girls a few slides back as well, that was a study in Adelaide in South Australia, and that was the exact same as well. So surely this is a global issue, and it's not just localised to Scotland. And that's mainly that's what I would say. Yeah, so thank you everyone for being a good sport and listening to me. If you have any questions, by the way.
Thank you. Okay, questions, Carl? I'll start you off then, while you think going. I want to explore the issue that you mentioned right at the beginning, which was that there's a shift towards people's involvement in lifestyle sports, and essentially also a drop-off in team sport participation. Can you articulate why you think that is? And secondly, do you think as we fund sport that actually we need to be recognising that people want to make different choices from traditionally we've funded team sports?
I think it's definitely a cultural thing. I think that there has been a shift in the way people kind of look at sport as well. Certainly your traditional stuff like basketball and things like that, that's where more so in girls looking at them, that's where they're feeling the stigma and stuff. So it can be very easy for them to go away to the gym by themselves when it's quiet, to stay active, but doing it where no one will kind of know about it, or whether they're not kind of in front of all the boys in class or whatever. So I think it's more comfortable for them to say that. And then also when you look at weight training and things like that, I think there's a kind of shift with kind of Instagram sport and things like that, and people having this kind of perfect image online. It makes them look like they're in the gym and stuff. So I think it is just cultural, and I think going forward maybe it is something that they should look at. Schools have PE, and they always will have PE. There's an argument again, should it be compulsory, but certainly is it a smart move to field like hill walking and stuff like that? Possibly. I mean, it's hill walking is one of the highest participation sports in the country, as we learned last year, apparently over football, but that's open for debate. Lewis?
You talked kind of briefly about youth development and how kind of rugby kind of does it. You compared with New Zealand and other countries, but certainly with Scotland, I know the Northern Hemisphere teams, they have quite a lot of players that maybe not born in the country. Tim Visser, for example, who obviously is born and bred Dutch, and he's played for Scotland. And a lot of these rules are quite relaxed. I think there's an over-reliance on these kind of these types of players because the rules are quite relaxed. And you think maybe we should be focusing on
I certainly think that's a separate issue. I don't know if it comes into youth participation, but maybe to an extent. But I think the rules are getting better. It's now 5 years for residencies as opposed to 3, and it's very hard to distinguish now, and that's in all sports, and it's not just Scotland, all countries are at it. And we look when Ken Pratt spoke to us in first year very much with plastic Brits with the Olympics, like how British are Olympians. So it is a big issue, but I think that needs to be addressed, but I don't think it should have any sway on the kind of youth participation in the way we tackle sport homegrown, because mainly this is one of the youth grassroots. I've used it a lot, but I think this needs to kind of tackle sport at a local level and not the performance and the top talent. I think it's the kind of the people who want to play socially and just kind of fitness at that level. Toshi?
Yes, my question is going to be, you're talking about youth participation, but most especially in Scotland, you can see the rate over, the youth that involved in sport is very, very low. And when you look at the associated health risks, they're really very high. So instead of just, putting up plans or contingencies where they say, okay, this is from the regeneration or this is part of the legacy, why don't we try to bring in a mode or some sort of like modus operandi where we amalgamate youth participation together with parental participation, so much so that the youth can be encouraged to get involved in sport or do that sort of thing. What would be your suggestion or comment on that?
Yeah, I think so is that like doing sport with parents?
Yes.
I think that's quite interesting. I think it worked for some people, but not others. Certainly, I don't know how all kids would feel, especially that kind of stigma of kind of being self-conscious at school. I don't know if you'd want to be like seen as going about for a kickabout with your dad instead of your friends, which is bonkers. Really, it should be fine, but it just depends how it's perceived from the individual. But certainly in theory, it could work. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Adam?
See, with all this talk coming out now regarding like head injuries, rugby, things like that, do you think that's putting off children, young people from getting involved in the sport in the first place because they're worried about what it might do to their bodies?
Yeah, I think not so much from the kids. I think a lot comes down to the parents, and I think parents can be protective, and I think in sport you really need to focus on what the kid wants. I heard there was a good quote actually I'd heard. It was talking about when you're a kid and you're playing sport in the school, you pick 2 captains, you pick the best player, and then you just pick players until you play, and then you're playing the game. If you're winning 5-6-0, you say, oh no, right, you go across and even it out, and it works perfect with kids. But then the parents get involved at weekends and they overcomplicate it, and I think a lot of the time it comes down to the parents, not the kids. And I think parents can be protective for their children, which is fair enough when you're seeing worrying statistics come out, but certainly there needs to be a kind of a middle ground of what the sport can kind of provide protection for young people. If it is banning heading under the age of 10, fair dues, but I think that comes down to the sport picking that, and then the kids kind of want to get involved with whatever they want. Martin?
I think it really matters in the grand scheme of things that people don't want to be involved in sport in the least school.
Well, I think it's as blunt as it is. I think it does for health and things like that, but certainly I think it's also one of the things. I've said a lot of kind of negative things, but if someone was to ask me how do we fix it, I'd be struggling to give you an answer. I think it's culture. If kids don't want to play sport, you can't force them to play sport. So I think it is what it is. It's just fair comment.
I mean, do you, just to follow up on that, do you think it's because, and I've maybe mentioned this question before, is about what we call sport? So you started off with the definition of what sport is, and for many people, I think a lot of the evidence would suggest for girls in particular, sport as a thing, so it's negative, might be a negative perception, but you know, being active might not necessarily be negative. Look at the example of park run as a concept, the whole concept of park runs for adults who didn't normally exercise, and for kids, increasingly junior park runs. You get people who just go out on a 5k run or a 2k run, and it's not competitive, it doesn't have to be competitive, and it's just gone through the roof in terms of participation levels. But then you get governments coming involved and local authorities saying you can't use our park because of the park maybe we should be charging them, and it becomes a kind of issue. Suddenly something that's about inclusion participation becomes a political, you know, it becomes a problem actually politically. So is it that we're using this concept of sport far too often?
Yeah, I think it's quite easy for people to kind of differentiate between sport and then connectivity. You could look at your sport like, oh no, people aren't going to volleyball club down the road, but then people could be running about and stuff like that. So I think maybe they should look at it all as one and not two separate issues. And it's just if kids are being active, and that's the real goal at the end of the day for these kind of bodies. And I think then with regards to like stop the community kind of shooting themselves in the foot and the council shooting themselves in the foot and not letting kids be involved in that or go running in parks or shutting up the football cage during summer. You know, they need to kind of take a responsibility because that's they're kind of campaigning for the people to be more active and then shooting themselves in the foot. So certainly if they kind of that's more of a kind of moral obligation to kind of, oh no, if these kids want to do that, it shouldn't be about us laying in pockets or getting them to pay, because then that kind of brings in almost social economic class as well with sports participation, which is a whole other issue, but that's what it's doing.
Okay, thank you very much. And last, I'm not going to say it, last is Craig.
It's happening a lot as well. I feel like it's
If you want, you can switch off the screen. If you want to edit
sorry. How is it you get to, do you know you can put it in a mode where you can get the notes underneath on the screen?
It should be in the presenter, if you want to slideshow.
Oh yeah,
presenter. But we tried this before. Somebody tried that last week, didn't they?
Yeah.
It was presenter mode and it didn't, I don't know. Not maybe it was.
You wanted to get the notes at the bottom? I tried that last week, but I couldn't get it until
It's PowerPoint expert.
You started to help with that, but I just...
I was like, the font's been a wee bit funny before the start, just you might excuse it.
You said it's like afterwards.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so good afternoon everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Craig, and this is my presentation on sport and doping. So obviously it's quite a broad subject, so I decided to get kind of different forms of doping, if you like, these days with like financial doping. There's a lot of talk around that, but I decided to concentrate on the more kind of classic form of doping, if you can call it that, and using performance enhancing drugs. So I wanted to try and get the most comprehensive, oh, it's not coming up, 2 seconds. Oh, sorry. So this is just my, what I'm going to talk about. So first of all, going into what actually is doping. and then after that give you a bit of the history of doping and using performance enhancing drugs. Then I'm going to talk about why the athletes dope, which I think is important to actually talk about the reasons behind it. Then I'm going to look at a couple of famous cases, and then finally round up with my potential arguments for doping. So this is what I was initially thought was going to come up second. Wanted to try and get the most kind of comprehensive definition of it that I could, so I thought this fitted the bill, and it's from the European Commission. So doping, their definition is the administration to or used by a healthy individual of any agent or substance not normally present in the body and or of any physiological agent or substance when introduced in abnormal additional quantities and or by an abnormal route and or in an abnormal manner, with the purpose and effect of increasing artificially and in an unfair manner the performance of that individual during a period of competition. It's a bit of a mouthful, so to put it in more simple terms, doping is athletes taking illegal substances to improve their own performance. So the WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, that was put together by the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, in 1999, and they initiated this agency to promote, coordinate and monitor the fight against drugs in sport. So the WADA, they produce a prohibited substance list every single year. The list is updated annually, and that is to allow them to keep up with advancements in science and technology. So it comes into effect on the 1st of January every year. The list currently contains 5 classes of substances and 3 methods of doping that are banned at all times, with a further 4 substances banned during the period of competition. So the most commonly used stimulants and hormones, the most commonly used methods of doping are stimulants and hormones. These are androgenic agents such as anabolic steroids and which is more commonly known as EPO, which is quite prominent in doping cases in cycling especially. So androgenic agents allow athletes to train harder, recover quicker and build up more muscle, and the stimulants make the athlete more alert and can make them overcome the effects of fatigue by increasing the heart rate and blood flow. So a substance can be added, so obviously they make a new list every single year, and a substance can be added to the list if it meets 2 of the following 3 criteria. If it has the potential to enhance performance, obviously, if it has the potential to be detrimental to the athlete's health, and if there is a violation of the spirit of sport by using said substance. So a little bit about doping history now. So obviously it's a major issue in modern sport when you think of all the examples you could talk about of doping, and obviously, as I mentioned, financial doping becoming more of a problem. But however, it's not a new problem. Using drugs to enhance performance can be dated all the way back to ancient times when the Greeks and the Romans used to use mushrooms and herbs to enhance their performance. More recent forms of performance enhancers can take their roots from World War II, when amphetamines were used by American soldiers to keep them alert, and the German soldiers used anabolic steroids to increase their aggressive behaviour. So a wee timeline here for you. So back in 1966, the UCI, which is the governing body of cycling, and FIFA, obviously the governing body of football, were among the first international sporting federations to introduce doping tests in the World Championships. I don't know why that's coming up before. So I'll start again. So 1928, the International Association of Athletics Federations became the first international sports federation to ban the use of stimulating substances, and then in 1966 the UCI and FIFA were among the first independent sporting federations to introduce doping tests in their own World Championships. In 1967 the IOC set up the first list of prohibited substances. In 1968 the first drug test was introduced at the Winter Olympic Games in Grenoble in France that year, and then again at the Summer Olympics in Mexico. In 1970, by this point, the majority of the independent international sporting federations had introduced drug testing. In 1975, anabolic steroid use was banned following the development of a test. After this, there was a great surge in disqualifications for using these drugs. In the following years, the prohibited substance list grew. Caffeine, which is actually now permitted, testosterone, blood doping and EPO were all added to the list. In 1998, a huge drug scandal at the Tour de France that year highlighted the kind of desperate need for an independent international agency to set the standards for anti-doping work across the sporting world. And then the WADA is established a year later in 1999. So I thought it was important to look at why an athlete may actually choose to dope, and a few reasons I've got down here. So obviously there's a pressure to succeed. There's also especially in cycling, the belief that their competitors are using performance enhancers. Also, another aspect could be this pressure from the governments and national authorities, which is something I'll go into a little bit later on. Then there's obviously the personal rewards, the fame and the financial gains that can come from being the top athlete in your chosen sport. There's also the lack of access to or funding for training facilities and additional support, which would obviously prevent you from doping, meaning you wouldn't have to if you had access to these things. The community and media attitudes from, for example, your given country, and the expectations of success that are kind of placed upon you when you're representing your country. So this was an explanation given by Michael Shermer in 2011, and he said that the reason is threefold. One, that the drugs work. Two, the arms race between drug takers and drug testers is consistently won by the dopers. And three, the athletes believe they have to dope to compete. Examining each of these three shows how the game matrix of sports changed from doping as cheating to doping as a rational choice. So now I'm going to look at a couple of examples. Obviously there's loads, but I thought I would choose this one, East Germany, because I'd never actually heard anything about this before, and I found out about it in my research. So the German Democratic Republic, the GDR, which is more commonly known as East Germany, they actually conducted a decades-long doping program on their elite athletes, using various performance enhancers such as testosterone and anabolic steroids. This was either with or without the athlete's knowledge. So basically the program was that in Germany you get a lot of sports clubs, and basically in East Germany at the time, children were being scouted by the government and then taken, if they obviously saw potential in them, they were taken for intense Olympic training with the aim of providing great success. And it's there that the doping would start after they've done this. So the government of East Germany, they kind of used that as, in the same way that Hitler used the 1936 Olympics as a kind of propaganda for Nazi Germany. They saw sport and achieving sport and success as an opportunity to kind of boost the reputation of East Germany at the time. So the head of the GDR Sports Federation was a man called Manfred Ewald, and he actually imposed blanket doping on all these German athletes. He's quoted at the time and haven't actually said this. They're still so young and don't have to know everything. So the results for the state were great, and from 1956 to the 1988 Winter and Summer Olympics, the medal haul for East Germany was 203 gold medals, 192 silver and 177 bronze, which is huge for, I think the population of East Germany was roughly 17 million, and I mean those figures are huge for what was a kind of relatively small nation. However great they were for the state, the effects of this doping program were devastating for the athletes, and this is from a book by Grix and Dennis. It was published in 2012. So they said, while figures cannot be precise, the state-inspired doping programme affected perhaps as many as 10,000 athletes. Not only was cheating at the centre of the programme, but so was the abuse of the athletes' health. Female athletes, including adolescents, experienced viralisation symptoms, and possibly as many as 1,000 sportsmen and women suffered serious and lasting physical and psychological damage. So Jean-Pierre de Mondenard, who is an expert in performance-enhancing drugs, he said that while doping existed in other countries, both communist and capitalist, of course East Germany was a communist socialist country at the time, the difference with East Germany was that it was a state policy. I think there's actually one example of, I've got the name, Andreas Krieger, who was formerly Heidi Krieger, competed as a female shot put participant, and such was the extent of the amount of hormones and performance enhancing drugs she was given from the age of 16. She actually, in 1997, she had a sexual reformation operation, which kind of shows you the effects, just one example of the effects of the doping programme had. So obviously, I don't think there could be a sport and doping presentation without mentioning this man here, Lance Armstrong. So in 1993, he was a road cyclist. I'm sure you'll all be familiar with him. Back in 1993, he becomes a cycling world champion. And then he went on to win the Tour de France a record 7 consecutive times from 1997 to 2005. He was diagnosed with potentially fatal testicular cancer in 1996 and was given a slim chance of survival. I actually read a story that the doctor, when he told Lance Armstrong his chances of survival, he didn't lie, but he didn't tell him the kind of full extent of it. I suppose to give him hope of survival, and of course, as we all know, he went on to make a full recovery, and that was when he won his 7 titles in a row. He founded the Lance Armstrong Foundation, and that raised millions to help fellow cancer sufferers all over the world. So obviously he becomes this an icon all over the world. He's a hero, and myself personally, I read his autobiography and I thought he was a hero, and then it wasn't until everything kind of came out that you realised the extent of what he'd been doing. So he faced doping allegations from as early as 1999, but he'd always passionately denied these allegations, and it wasn't until in 2012 when the United States Anti-Doping Agency, an investigation that they carried out, concluded that he used performance-enhancing drugs over the course of his career and named him the ringleader of the most sophisticated, professionalised and successful doping programme that sport has ever seen. So after that, he actually accepted the results of that investigation. He chose not to contest them because at the time he said it would be detrimental to his family. But then the next year, I'm sure we've all seen some part of this interview in 2013 with Oprah Winfrey. He admits to not all of the allegations, but certainly to most of them. And from there, he was stripped of all his titles, dating all the way back to August 1998. So this was from an article that was published by CNN, and they said, the epic downfall of cycling's star, once an idolised icon of millions around the globe, stands out in the history of professional sports. So when I was in my research, I was actually surprised to find out that there is some people who argue that doping should just be allowed in sport. There shouldn't be any regulations over it, and athletes should be free to kind of do whatever they want. So, and they argue that it should be allowed for entertainment purpose, that would allow the spectators to witness kind of optimum levels of performance, and there would be no limit basically to how high those levels could go. So this was from a man called, I think it's Aaron No, and this was in 2012. He said that, all sports are like Formula 1. The goal is to win, but the project is to make the optimal vehicle. and then to learn how to use it and tune it and transform it, aka yourself if you're talking about athletes, into something capable of going just beyond the limits of what is possible. And so athletes, or rather their coaches and teams and cultures, study and experiment. He goes on to say that from this standpoint it is natural, appropriate and entirely in accord with the spirit of the project of athletic achievement to explore and then exploit the benefits afforded by new knowledge and new technologies. His arguments are countered by a man called Johan Olav Koss, and he said in 2002, "The battle against doping is every athlete's fight. Ideals of dignity, human excellence and fair play are not unique to the Olympic movement, but apply to the very nature of sport. To be the best an athlete can be. But at some point a line must be drawn between being the best through hard work, perseverance and certain levels of biological luck and that of taking extraordinary means. Doping, winning at all costs, cannot be accepted, least of all by athletes." And that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, questions? Doping.
Sure, I'll ask one. I was actually going to ask it, I was thinking it the whole way through and then you kind of touched it in the last slide, but I watch a lot of sport, but I'm not really interested in athletics. I think it's because I like the thought that, okay, half of these people are probably cheating, and maybe the same with cycling as well. So what's your kind of standpoint on like open and safe doping? Like, do you think it's possible?
I think it is, and I found out in the research as well that in the kind of doping regulations and the list of banned substances, there is obviously like some things that athletes are permitted to take in like special circumstances. Where, for example, if that was like medication or something, they would maybe be given a bit of leeway. In terms of like, yeah, I agree with you about like cycling and athletics. They seem to be probably two of the worst sports for doping, and I don't know whether that's because so much of that is to do with like because it's so much about like individual performance. But yeah, I think that it's obviously safe doping, but obviously it has to be in special circumstances.
Yes, Craig. In my third year, I had the opportunity. I was working on a documentary about exactly doping and that sort of thing, and I managed to collaborate with one of the doctors, based at the University of Hamilton, in the Faculty of Science and Sport. But basically, one of his research, he's stating that why is it permissible for a lot of gym users, not inclusive me, they're allowed to basically dope. You're allowed to take steroids, to bulk up with a muscle or whatever. So how is it different from normal day-to-day people to professional athletes? What would be your standpoint on that?
I think if you're taking it from, if people want to use steroids for like their own choice, if they're going for their own leisure type thing, to go to the gym and maybe get bigger muscles, but I suppose when it steps over into actual like competitive sport, then there can't be any kind of grounds to say that you could be allowed to do the same as you would if you were just going to the gym. If you're competing against someone else, then there should be a level playing ground type thing.
Which is interesting, because that is the basis of sport, isn't it? And in a way, doping is the greatest example of the level playing field, equality, etc. at sport at the start being challenged. And I guess what my question was going to be about, there's been in the last decade or more, the kind of developments in sports science have been such that everyone, and cycling is a good example, they talk about the small gains, etc., and they just systematically apply the principles of science to try and secure gains. Is there a big difference or a gap between that and doping? Because we seem to think it's almost like so far apart. Doping is this really bad thing, whereas would it not be true to say that many people are pretty close to doping in that definition, because they are just within the law, or perhaps they're not within the law, but they are outside of being caught, if you like. So they're, I guess that was.
Yeah, so I think that in the guy that I quoted to his argument for that was that you should kind of be able to use like the kind of scientific advances that we've got available to us to kind of push the boundaries of what's been possible before. But for me, I don't think it's like watching sport. I think it kind of, as Johnny was saying as well, I wouldn't be particularly interested in watching sport if you know that it's been, if they've kind of used like different methods to, if it's not, I don't know, for natural ability, for example, if they've actually used different like kind of scientific advancements to improve their performance, it's not really, it's not a natural thing.
And I guess I would counter on that one then, is that not already happening? Because sport at the elite level is already in favour of the more wealthy nations.
Yeah.
Those that can have a whole team of people working with you to make sure you get the maximum gain. And that actually if you live in a country where they don't have that resources and you're an athlete in a country with those resources, you're already starting way behind on the line, aren't you? You're already struggling, if you like, to be at that level. So it further kind of emphasises this challenge of saying money and resources. I think you showed up on the slide that some people say that people think it's okay because actually they're starting, we can't compete if they don't do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously there is an argument that if you were born in a country that's maybe a slightly poorer, less developed country, that if you look, I mean, Russia obviously, that there's a lot just now about the kind of state-funded doping program pretty much. So yeah, I think another thing as well I was going to mention is that I don't think you can really stop doping, to be honest. If an athlete is going to dope, or if the state is kind of got these programs in place, then how do you stop it? So I think that's obviously a bigger debate.
Just like a final point, it's different to actual doping, it's more like recreational drug use. I was wondering what your stance was on, like, I know it's illegal and that, but the example of Jordan McMillan that played with Partick Thistle, he got found tested positive for having cocaine in his system, and then he was banned from football for like 18 months. Like, do you think that's a bit over the top? I know he might be a role model in that, but at the end of the day people do that, but it's illegal, but it happens and it's not exactly performance enhancing. I was just wondering what your stance was on kind of what people actually using drugs recreationally. Obviously it shouldn't have happened, but the punishment's a bit too far.
I think I agree with you, the punishment is probably a bit heavy, but I suppose you've got to kind of say about the whole role model type thing, if that's all over the news and stuff. But another thing I found in the research is that cocaine is actually, it's considered a stimulant. So that is like part of the prohibited substances. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what is it, the right kind of punishment for someone using something like cocaine, but I mean, I don't think they should be using stuff like that if they're a professional footballer or professional sports person.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a much I mean, as a final point, doping is such a difficult terrain because today, I don't know if anyone's seen kind of recent Eric Cantona interviews where he's been interviewed again and stuff because he's got this great statement which is, I am not willing to be a role model. I do not take on that role. I am not a role model. They were asking again about the kick into the kung fu kick into the crowd. He's like, well, you know, I never said I was a role model. I didn't want to be a role model. I was just a football player with a lot of passion and emotion. And I think that's kind of quite interesting around about how we justify sport and often justify certain things in sport because the role model is clearly one of those that's used. Okay, couple of things. Thank you for that. That was great. Everyone's now done their presentation. So the sheets have gone round for the module evaluation. I am going to run a class next week, next Tuesday. Just at the same time, and again what I'm going to do is provide kind of generic feedback on the two forms of assessment. I will hopefully have finished all the marking for the second assessment by then too, so you'll have everything back, and so we'll do a kind of generic session on that, and then again individual sessions with people. So again, I'll leave the last kind of hour free for doing individual sessions, because I think obviously you're now halfway through your final year, pretty much halfway through your final year. People will have questions about the first assessment, which should now be released, or it should be almost released. Elizabeth's now approved everything. So the marks that are on the grade mark will be the marks. And so I will discuss individual issues in that last session. So again, if you are unable to be there, then that's fine. You can maybe email me, but I'll run a session specifically about generic feedback, because I think there are things through presentations and essays that you can still learn from in terms of what you've got to do for your critical research project and creative research project, sorry, and any further assessments. Okay, but thanks for all your contributions to the presentation. Thanks for coming and asking questions. Everyone did that really well. It made it more of a learning environment rather than just someone presenting to the next person presenting. So thanks for that. Put a light on really, shouldn't I? I saw it peeking in right there. I know sometimes I shouldn't have said. Callum, sorry, I was creating.
Next Tuesday?
Yes.
I'm in my local paper, so I want to possible to get like email.